He dreamed of becoming a great adventurer, but his unique skill turned out to be a vegetable garden. Just when he thought his life was over, the soil came alive, growing meat trees, gold carrots, and maybe a golem or two. With his lazy sister and childhood friends, he's about to farm his way into legend. The world's strongest weapon might just be fertilizer. Even kings will bow to his garden's bounty. Who needs adventure when you can cultivate miracles? Let's find out. This story begins with the provincial town of Arcel preparing for the festival of the descending gods. This is a sacred day once a year, when the gods who reside in the heavens are believed to descend to earth. People celebrate it with great pomp and ceremony. The gods bestowed special blessings on those who reached the age of 15. These blessings included skills for adventuring, trade, and crafting. The power of these blessings, which bestowed various abilities, were called gifts. On the day of the festival, the protagonist, Gio, burst into his sister Senna's room and began shaking her awake. The girl sleepily begged for a few more minutes, but the protagonist was adamant. He indignantly exclaimed, "How much longer will she sleep?" He pulled the blanket off her and declared that today was the festival of the fallen gods. Senna, rubbing her sleepy eyes, said that her older brother was being naughty. MC kindly, brotherly advised her to shut up and get ready quickly, or they would miss prayer. Senna stretched sweetly and held out her hands to her brother. He indignantly asked her, "Can't she at least get dressed herself?" The girl frowned and pouted, letting him know that this upset her. The protagonist thought resignedly, "She's so spoiled." They would become adults after receiving gifts at today's celebration. This year, he and Senna turned 15. They were the same age, but they were brother and sister. Senna always called him Big Brother, and now she called him that too. Although they had different fathers, he was born a few months before her. He didn't know the details. His mother must have exhausted her love for them. Not a very good reason, right? His father, who was a good adventurer, died over a year ago. Since then, he and Senna had lived together. He told her they'd go to the square then. On the way, Senna confessed to him that she was so nervous. She wondered what gift she'd receive. The protagonist chuckled thoughtfully and said, "Only God knows." Gio exclaimed. He hoped the gift he'd receive would help him in his adventures. His sister noticed. "He keeps saying that, doesn't he?" He answered her. He cared. He wanted to become an adventurer like his father. And so, all questions aside, but in fact, he had other reasons. He mentally told himself everything would be fine. Senna said, "She's just sure he'd receive a good gift. She had a feeling." MC asked, "A feeling? She's still as reckless as before, isn't she?" Senna laughed good-naturedly at his words and declared she'd be happy with her life if her brother supported her. The protagonist playfully flicked her on the head and told her she should work too, lazybones. Arriving, he told her he was praying for her. When they entered the prayer hall, the protagonist told her everyone was already praying and that she should join them. He thought it was a tradition to pray to the gods at sunrise and watch it rise. At that moment, all those in need receive a special blessing. The protagonist looked at his sister. She folded her hands in prayer, closed her eyes, and fervently prayed for a blessing that would help her in her adventures. Suddenly, he heard the goddess's voice, telling him this gift was for her, and then she would give him hers, or rather, she would give him a different gift. It was called a vegetable garden. The protagonist's amazement knew no bounds. He heard the young man sitting in front of him exclaim, he did it. He received a blessing that would help him in the family business. The MC thought about his gift in surprise. He'd never heard of such a blessing, and he didn't think it was useful. Senna called out to him and asked how it went. He wondered, what about his sister? He asked her what gift she'd received. The girl told him she had the favor of the sword god, something like that. The protagonist looked at her in bewilderment and thought, that's not very nice to say. He grabbed her by the shoulders and exclaimed, this is simply amazing. The gift of the sword, maybe that's a rarity. He'll help her in her adventures, just like she wanted. She did it, Senna said. He's too close. The protagonist let go of her and apologized, saying he'd gotten nervous. Senna answered him with a laugh. She'd almost thought he was going to kiss her. Having calmed down from her laughter, she asked him, how are you doing? What did they give him? The protagonist hesitated before answering. He prayed that he wanted to become an adventurer. He asked God to grant him this gift, so that it would help him in his adventures. Gathering his courage, he answered her that the gift he had received was called a vegetable garden. Senna asked him in confusion, a vegetable garden? MC covered his face with his hands and said, a vegetable garden. At that moment, they heard the hysterical laughter of Annie, the protagonist's old friend. Through sobs of laughter, she exclaimed, a vegetable garden. Embarrassed, Shifa, also a childhood friend of the protagonist, told her she shouldn't do that. Annie, through laughter, asked her, what's wrong? Well, that's ridiculous. Shifa pointed out that it was punishment to laugh at God's gift and disrespectful to Gio. The siblings stared at the girls in surprise. The protagonist was stunned with shame. He couldn't believe she heard him. Shifa said conciliatorily, it's an unusual gift, true, but it is what it is. Senna, in support of her brother, said, it is so. She wondered if her brother would be able to feed her properly with this gift. The protagonist, confused, wondered what she was worried about. Shifa answered, everything will be fine. She was sure it would come in handy. It was a gift that depended on the user. MC only perked up when Annie laughed again at his gift of the vegetable garden. He thought irritably, she shouldn't laugh at misfortunes. The thing was, these two were his sisters, whom he'd known since childhood. Shifa was born 3 years ago. Annie, born a little earlier than him, received her gift at the autumn festival a year ago, and now they both worked as adventurers. Annie had the gift of a hunter's sense of smell, and Shifa had the gift of an empress's prestige. At her age, she had already achieved a force to be reckoned with. In short, he wanted to become an adventurer too. The main reason was that he wanted it because of Shifa. Annie nudged him in the side with her elbow and said, "She's so sorry. It seems he can't be an adventurer with Shifa." The protagonist exclaimed indignantly, "Why did she say that?" Senna and Shifa looked at him in surprise. He said, "No, if they saw, they would know." The protagonist was covered in a sticky sweat from the strain. How could she know that? Annie laughed again and asked his sister, "What about her gift? Can they watch it together?" Looking at Senna's gift, Shifa said in surprise, "The favor of the sword god." Annie said in confusion, "She's never heard of such a thing, but judging by the name, the gift is powerful." Senna agreed. She thought she'd be a strong swordswoman. Annie had noticed, right, she definitely should become an adventurer. She means, would she like to join their group? Senna, incredulous, answered yes. Annie continued, "They need a new team member now, so she's just in time." The girl asked Shifa if she's okay with it, right? The girl answered, "Of course, she's all for it. If it's Senna, then no problem." The girl couldn't believe what she heard. The protagonist thought in amazement, Senna is in Shifa's group. He would like to be with them too. If only he were given a powerful gift that would help him in his adventures. He felt very sad and hurt. His sister, noticing his state, called out to him. He answered her. She was invited to this group. There's no need to hesitate, right? Senna wanted to say something to him, but he interrupted her and continued. In fact, he doesn't think he can make money with such a gift. She's not so naive as to expect him to feed her. The protagonist stroked her head and said, "She's grown up so much, she needs to work hard on herself." Shifa said his name warningly. It was clear Senna was uneasy. He removed his hand from her head and told Shifa that he understood. Senna exclaimed again, "She's going to be an adventurer." After a while, she told her brother that they'd see each other soon. She plans to make a ton of money while she's young and live the rest of her life in idleness. The protagonist asked her in surprise, "Is that all she wants?" After she left, he realized he'd never thought he'd miss his sister so much. Besides, a great adventure with Shifa awaited her. He was still depressed and envious of Senna's gift. The protagonist went to the garden, thinking about his gift along the way. A gardener, what could he possibly do with it? If he understood correctly, that term meant a vegetable garden at home, but he doesn't tend his garden at all. It's a useless gift since he doesn't have a vegetable garden. MC paused, thinking about this, and suddenly he heard a voice, as if in his head. The voice asked him if he wanted to allocate this plot for his vegetable garden. He didn't understand what had happened. He saw a glowing patch of land. Panic overcame him. What was wrong with him? Was he hallucinating? There's no one here, right? Where did that voice come from then? And what was that corner where the ground was flashing anyway? He heard the voice again, asking him if he wanted to set it aside for a vegetable garden. The protagonist was amazed. The voices were coming again. Were they in his head? He looked at the glowing area and wondered if he should set it aside for a vegetable garden. He was scared, unsure of the whole thing. After some thought, the protagonist made his decision, and again the voice spoke for him. He had set it aside for a vegetable garden. Before his eyes, the ground in that area turned dark. His surprise knew no bounds. What was this? MC knelt down and touched the ground. He was surprised that it had very soft soil. But was this crazy? It was like a field, a garden in an instant. He muttered, "So what now?" At that moment, a system window appeared in the air, displaying information. Geo's vegetable garden, level 1, no skills. The protagonist was stunned to the limit. A home garden. A voice asked him if he wanted to start growing it. The system immediately gave him a list of what was available. These included wheat, potatoes, tomatoes, garlic, cucumbers, barley, carrots, eggplant, bok choy, turnips, pumpkin, lettuce, and green peppers. Everything was of average quality. MC thought in confusion. So he could choose the crops he wanted to grow here? He decided to just do it. Suddenly he saw a start button in the air. He thought perhaps he needs to specify the desired crop using this button. The protagonist decided to choose potatoes and pressed the start button. The system voice asked him if he wanted to grow potatoes, he should specify the quantity and the location. When he answered all the system's questions, the quantity of the vegetable was 150, and they needed to be planted at the far end. The system illuminated the spot he needed and asked him, "Is this the right place?" The protagonist, surprised, confirmed it. A voice responded, "He started growing potatoes." Geo thought with a surprised smile. He started growing, but he hasn't even planted any seeds. He laughed and remarked, "Vegetables are so easy to grow. It can't be true. You can really grow them with this?" He thought, well, it doesn't cost anything. He should try other crops, 1 seed per square. Although this one has 50 squares, so he needs to choose 10 varieties, 5 squares each. Having accomplished his goal, the protagonist said, "Okay, that's it. It all looks the same, but it seems he's finished here. But this is a DVR, isn't it?" He still didn't understand. Well, he'll have to come back here often to see how things are going. Suddenly, to his surprise, a sprout emerged from the ground, and within an hour, his garden had transformed into a magnificent vegetable patch. His amazement knew no bounds. Was it really that simple? It would take a regular farmer months? Was this the effect of his gift? He touched the vegetables and noted that there were a lot of them, and they were all fresh and tasty. The protagonist wondered if he could harvest them yet, but it would be difficult. A voice asked him if he wanted to harvest them. The protagonist was astonished. Were they reading his thoughts? He decided there was no point in thinking about it now, and answered the voice that it was true. He wanted to harvest them. As soon as he said this, the vegetables began to gather themselves into cups and baskets. Gio was truly shocked. The vegetables had gathered themselves by themselves. Very quickly, all the containers were filled with the harvest. The protagonist examined everything and, kneeling, looked at his hand in surprise. He thought about the voice in his head, the land that plowed in the blink of an eye, mysterious symbols like level and skill, crops that grew abnormally fast without the need for planting. All these inexplicable phenomena, happening one after another, culminating in vegetables harvesting themselves and a basket appearing before he could even think. And now he realized how convenient it was. Now he was completely delighted. Having calmed down, the protagonist touched the vegetables with his hands, wondering if they were edible. MC picked up a tomato and began to examine it. Come to think of it, it looked like an ordinary delicious tomato. Taking a bite, he was delighted. It was delicious. The protagonist examined the bite and noted that the vegetable's flesh was tightly packed with many gelatinous, smooth parts. The vegetable itself was sweet like a fruit, but it had a corresponding acidity. He tried a few more fruits and was satisfied. He could have eaten them all. They were all of the same quality. This was simply incredible. Perhaps not only tomatoes, but other vegetables of the same quality. Meanwhile, Senna and her friends arrived at the place. Senna exclaimed in delight, "Wow, such amazing meadows here." Shifa said there was a dungeon nearby, ruled by Lord Arcel. They adventurers were exploring it. She added that it was a dangerous labyrinth infested with demons, but also a place where they could obtain valuable materials. Adventurers ventured into dungeons to get rich quick. Senna was simply overjoyed. She had never been outside the city before. Annie cooled her ardor, telling her that she was a newbie, but she would get used to it by fighting monsters. And since she had never held a sword before, why not practice? Senna replied that she would try. The girl pulled out her sword and said she just bought it yesterday. Shifa remarked, "It's not bad." Annie thought that since Senna had received the gift of a sword, she should progress quickly. She grabbed her sword and mentally activated the demon's presence. At that moment, a goblin appeared. Shifa exclaimed in alarm, "Goblins? How many of them?" Annie told her not to worry, just this one. This is just what a budding adventurer needs. The girl told Senna to get down to business and get ready. The protagonist's sister swung her sword so hard that Annie asked in surprise, "What was that?" Shifa noted, it happened so quickly that she didn't even have time to see the weapon. Senna laughed joyfully and shouted, "Is this really that great? With this, she can kill a goblin." The girl prepared to rush at her opponent. Annie called out to her in alarm, and Shifa also warned her that it wasn't safe to be alone suddenly. Senna told them not to worry about her. She thought she knew, and she could defeat him. The goblin grabbed a projectile and launched it at her. Annie exclaimed in surprise, "Throwing a projectile?" Shifa called out to Senna in warning. The girl, confused, shielded herself with her sword, parrying the enemy's blow. The projectile bounced off the weapon, and she screamed, "Now he's going to get it." The young adventurer swung her sword and decapitated the monster in a second. Her allies were simply stunned by what had just happened. Senna turned to them and exclaimed, "They did it! This is their victory." Annie, incredulous, thought, the courage to single-handedly take on a monster, the instantaneous strength and dynamic vision to quickly deflect a thrown stone with her sword, the spirit that could kill a living creature without hesitation, even a demon, and above all, her swordsmanship. It was simply baffling. Senna, meanwhile, picked up the attribute dropped by the goblin and inquired what it was. Annie thought, it seemed they had a new talent. That evening, Senna returned home and called out to the protagonist that she was already back. He was delighted to see her and informed her that dinner had just been prepared. The protagonist asked her how her first adventure had gone. She told him it was fun. She fought a demon. MC noticed. Really? Suddenly, the meaning of her words dawned on him. He turned around and exclaimed in amazement, "What was that? Out of nowhere. Is she okay, unhurt?" Senna laughed at his reaction and said she was fine. She rested her chin in her hands, looked at him, and said with all seriousness, he was worrying too much. Her sisters were with her, and demons are weak. It was her first time with a sword, but it felt good in her hands. He noticed again, that's how it was. He thought maybe it was her gift. He envied her. The protagonist put a plate of food on her plate and said, "Well, here's her reward for her first success." Senna happily exclaimed, "Wow, stew!" The protagonist thought with a smile, today he used vegetables from the garden, so now they don't have to skimp on them. Although, there's not much meat. MC wished his sister bon appetit and wondered what the stew tasted like. She tried the food and stared at the plate in amazement. The protagonist anxiously asked her, "What is it?" The girl looked up at him, her eyes full of admiration, and exclaimed that it was incredibly delicious. She asked him what kind of stew it was. All the vegetables were so delicious. The protagonist smiled and replied, "Yes, today is different." She agreed with him that it was. It was an unusual stew. He happily thought that now he too should try this dish. After taking a spoonful, he realized that it was truly delicious. Senna, devouring her dinner, said it was so rich and sweet. She'd never tasted vegetables so delicious. The protagonist agreed. It was a whole other level compared to the vegetables he'd eaten before. His sister couldn't stop raving. There was so much here, and it was all delicious. He told her he was glad she was satisfied. Finally, Senna asked him, What's wrong with this? Where did he get these vegetables? The protagonist asked her if she wanted him to tell her. He was about to tell her about his experiment, but his sister interrupted him before he could finish, asking for more. The protagonist was embarrassed. It was foolish to think she'd listen to him. After dinner, the girl patted her stomach and said, I ate too much. He asked her to come over for a minute while he explained. After a while, Gio led her out to his garden. Senna exclaimed in surprise, There's a garden in the yard. The protagonist replied, The vegetables they ate today were picked here. She was amazed. What was he talking about? Maybe it was the power of his gift. The protagonist replied, Apparently yes. He thought it would save them money on food. His sister exclaimed, Wow, so, from now on, she can eat this delicious food every day. He looked at her in surprise and thought he would be happy to receive a gift that would help him in his adventures. But his garden is amazing, he said. He just ate so much food. Senna responded with a joyful laugh, her mouth watering just thinking about it. A stone fell out of her pocket and landed right on the garden bed. The protagonist asked her in surprise, What did that mean? The girl replied, It's a magic stone. She picked it up during her adventure today. He chuckled. A voice asked him, Do you want to use this item? The protagonist's eyes widened in surprise. Use it? Picking up the stone, he asked his sister. A magic stone is a stone made of frozen magical power, right? She answered in confusion. Yes. The protagonist asked her if he could take it. Senna agreed, but what was he going to do with it? He carefully placed the stone on the crop plot. A voice said, He used it. After a while, Gio thought in amazement, what an amazing ability. What would happen this time? He never thought it would be like this. Instantly, a tree full of meat grew before his eyes. It looked very bizarre. It was an ordinary tree, only large, and instead of fruit, chunks of meat hung from the branches. His amazement knew no bounds. He realized his gift was a vegetable garden, an amazing ability to create fields and reap delicious harvests. After using the magic stone, a meat tree grew. What is this? What kind of gift is this? Sometime later, Senna and her friends were fighting monsters in a dungeon near Arsel. After another battle, she exhaled heavily and said, I'm tired of so many demons. Annie said, They were killed in the blink of an eye. Now they pose no danger. Shifa said that if Senna can handle it, everything will be fine. She's ready for serious research. The protagonist's sister exclaimed, She found a magic stone and will take it for herself. Annie was surprised. A stone? She was sure such a small specimen wouldn't be worth much. Senna, laughing, answered, It's a souvenir for her older brother, for Gio. Shifa asked her how he was doing. He didn't seem so good on the day of the descent. Annie said, He wanted to become an adventurer, but his gift isn't suited for it. I wonder if he's still depressed. Shifa said she's a little worried. Senna exclaimed, Everything's fine. He stayed home. Besides, her brother is amazing. With his gift, he could take over the world. The allies stared at her in surprise. What was she talking about? The whole world, including the garden? Sometime later, when Senna returned home, she told her brother something that made him jump up as if stung, exclaiming, Does Shifa want to come over sometime? The girl noticed, and so did Annie. He began rushing around the house in a panic, exclaiming that they needed to clean up. He was overcome with excitement. It had been so long since Shifa had come to his house. He wanted to make her happy, but she had a neutral expression, and he couldn't understand what she was feeling. She was cool and sweet, but she didn't laugh as often as Annie. He clutched his head. He didn't know if he could make Shifa happy. On the contrary, what if she was disappointed? Senna, watching his pacing in surprise, called out to him irritably. The protagonist stopped and asked her, What's wrong? She exclaimed, Let him listen to her for once. Her sisters would come to them with one goal. They wanted to see their garden. The protagonist repeated, perplexed. A garden? Calming down, he mused. I wonder if they'd be happy if he showed them the produce? His sister assured him she was sure they would be. It was so delicious. He thought, Senna was so happy every time she ate. Maybe Shifa would be too. MC exclaimed, If that's true, he'll have to make the garden even better. Senna echoed his enthusiasm with an admiring cry. After a while, the siblings arrived at the garden and admired the meat tree. The protagonist thought about it. This didn't look like an ordinary garden anymore. Senna remembered something and, extending her hand to the protagonist, said, Here are some more magic stones for him. The protagonist was delighted. He was just about to level up. The system notified him that he had reached level 2, vegetable garden area, 100 out of 100. But he still had no skills. He thought, apparently, that the garden level could be increased with magic stones. Both the area could be expanded, and the number of crops could be grown increased. So that's what happened. Now he could grow meat. When he placed the stones on the plot, he didn't know what would happen this time. For now, he should try leveling up. A voice asked him if he wanted to use a magic stone. He answered, yes, all of them. Senna wondered in surprise, who was her brother talking to? She sat down next to him. The voice told him that he had started using magic stones. She wondered, surprised, why were they disappearing? 10 seconds later, the system notified him that he was already level 3. He was very happy about this. The voice told him that he could now expand the area and grow new crops. He decided to see what was now available to him. After looking at everything, the protagonist noted, wow, they now look like regular vegetables. Burdock, perilla, sweet potato? He'd never heard these names before. MC turned to his sister and asked her if she'd heard of them. She asked him, puzzled, what was he talking about? The protagonist thought, of course Senna doesn't know. His sister irritatedly remarked, he asked so rudely, is this some kind of exotic food? If they can harvest something like that, that would be great. The protagonist thought they should try growing it first. A short time later, Senna exclaimed, new vegetables. The protagonist answered, they've expanded their garden. Sitting down next to the new crop, he asked in confusion, "Is this a sweet potato, or a variety of it?" Senna offered him to try it. The vegetable turned purple after cooking, much to the protagonist's surprise. He said it was all about the flavor of the ingredients used to steam the potatoes. Senna tried the new vegetable and was delighted. It was delicious too. She added, "How sweet, and the texture is simply superb." The protagonist, after tasting it, declared, "This potato isn't a vegetable, it's an appetizer. It could definitely be a dessert." Senna devoured the potato and declared that its gift was simply amazing. She'd never tasted anything like it before. The protagonist replied that if she used the magic stone, he could make even more things. Senna, chewing her food, said she'd go and get something else. Gio thought in surprise. Senna, the lazy one, is motivated. Was it because of the garden? And so it continued. She brought him stones and he received a level up in his garden. Since his level had also increased, he had learned the art of gardening. Suddenly something caught his attention. He peered closely at the system message. Sometime later, the day of his friend's visit arrived. Shifa said, "Please forgive them for disturbing you." Annie hoped they arrived on time. The protagonist replied that everything was fine. Senna exclaimed, "Please come in. They're always welcome." Gio, looking at Shifa, thought an angel had landed in their house. Inviting the girls inside, he told Shifa that it was very kind of her to come visit them like this. Annie sarcastically apologized and said that she was there too. The protagonist retorted, "Please forgive him, he didn't notice her." The girl laughingly asked him, "Does he want to die?" MC said, "He hopes there won't be any disappointments." Annie exclaimed. Senna told them that it was great, and she came to see. Gio asked in surprise, "Senna?" Shifa noted that it was. She said that his garden would be a success. The protagonist exclaimed embarrassedly, "What? No, he didn't go that far. Senna is just exaggerating." Annie asked him sarcastically, "Really?" She didn't believe it. Such a simple gift as a vegetable garden. It's hard to believe. The girls strode decisively toward the plot, Shifa following her. When the girls saw the protagonist's handiwork, their amazement knew no bounds. Annie exclaimed, "Wow, but what is this? A whole garden?" The girls began examining each crop, admiring the variety of crops, vegetables, fruits, and the fact that there were even mushrooms here, and they were all growing so well. There was even a beautiful fence, Senna remarked. This garden used to be much more shabby. She was so surprised when it appeared. Annie asked the protagonist in amazement, "Is this all his work?" He replied that it was. It occurred to him at that moment that at level 5 he had learned the fence-making skill. Now he could build a fence around his garden in an instant. It was a great way to keep people from peering into the house from the outside. Annie said thoughtfully, she had underestimated him. It had never occurred to her that such a beautiful fence could be built. Then she looked at the garden and added, "She means they aren't affected by the seasons and the environment?" She had never seen some of these crops before. Senna asked her, "Isn't that very unusual?" Annie exclaimed, "I don't know what that is, but it looks delicious." The protagonist thought with a smile. The other day she had ridiculed him about his gift, and now he couldn't believe she was surprised. He noted that Shifa was, as always, impassive. Was she bored? Or maybe she was disappointed? MC asked her what she thought about it. Shifa replied in amazement, "It's so wonderful that she's surprised." The protagonist mentally rejoiced. He had surprised her, but maybe she was just trying to be polite. He said if they wanted, they could try something from their garden. She asked him if that was possible. She thanked him. He thought about it, but the best was yet to come, Annie remarked. Were they really allowed to try? MC said yes. It was almost time to harvest. He led them to his trees and laughingly introduced them. And here was meat. The girls' amazement seemed endless. They stared at the tree in bewilderment. Annie exclaimed, "Was she hallucinating?" Shifa said, "It looks like there really is meat on the trees." The protagonist said, "Well, yes." At first he too was surprised. Annie, shocked by his calm, asked him why he was talking about it so calmly. What was that anyway? Meat shouldn't grow on trees. The protagonist told her yes, but with his gift, it was possible. Annie couldn't calm down. What a strange gift he had. Senna said in surprise, "Doesn't meat grow on trees?" The protagonist remarked that, in any case, the produce from his garden was delicious. He'd harvest it, just give him a minute. Annie thought she'd lost her mind. Before her eyes, the produce was gathering itself, and even the meat was moving. She exclaimed, "He even has a basket? The meat just jumps in there?" The protagonist calmly remarked, "Very convenient, isn't it?" Annie cried out indignantly, "It's not about convenience, it's about the fact itself. What the hell is going on in this garden?" The girls looked at the meat in the basket. It looked so fresh and delicious. Gio suggested the girls have a barbecue for today. Senna enthusiastically accepted his offer. Annie said incredulously, "Let them wait? Can they really eat this?" She called out to Shifa questioningly. MC thought, no matter how good the meat tasted, she clearly wouldn't want to eat it due to the strange way it was produced. Shifa replied, she wants to try it. The protagonist didn't expect such an answer from her. Annie didn't either though. She asked her in bewilderment, "Is she serious? It's meat from a tree." Shifa smiled at her partner and said, "Don't worry, it's a gift from Gio." The protagonist was overjoyed to hear such a thing from her. The girl turned to the protagonist and offered to help. MC, in disbelief, asked her to cut the meat. She told him to leave it to her. She was looking forward to the barbecue. Shifa turned to Senna and offered to help them. Annie looked at her joyful allies in bewilderment. Then she said, "Well, she'll help them too." The protagonist asked her to take care of the vegetables. She told him she'd pick them right now, and then she exclaimed, "Oh no, they're moving on their own." As a result, all the friends were drooling watching the frying meat. Senna exclaimed, "It smells good." The protagonist said he thought it was ready to try. His sister raised her hand and shouted, "Excellent! Bon appetit, everyone!" The protagonist said, "Okay, Senna will go first." After that, he served the meat to Shifa and warned her to be careful. It was very hot. The girl thanked him. Annie, still hesitant, asked her if she was sure about this. Shifa, instead of answering, brought the food to her mouth. MC thought with bated breath. He couldn't even imagine what her reaction would be. After chewing a piece of meat, Shifa said in amazement, "It's simply delicious." The protagonist rejoiced. She was surprised. She liked it. It was so sweet. Annie couldn't believe her eyes. Was it that delicious? Senna delightedly asked Shifa. She liked it, right? Gio, smiling sheepishly, remarked, "He's so glad she liked it." The girl answered him, "She's never eaten meat more delicious than this." Senna, laughing, suggested that Annie try some. She took a bite, still skeptical, and was amazed by the softness and excellent texture of the product. After tasting it, she devoured the meat greedily, periodically exclaiming that it was so delicious, and she couldn't believe it grew on a tree. The protagonist was amazed. Even she was in awe. The girl closed her eyes in pleasure and declared, "Both beef and pork are delicious." Shifa added, "Vegetables and mushrooms too." Senna exclaimed, "She thinks she can eat everything here." The protagonist, holding a plate, told the guests they also had dessert if they wanted it. Sweet potato pie. The sister exclaimed delightedly, "Wow, that's that very tasty vegetable." Annie asked her, "Sweet potato?" She'd never heard of it. Shifa exclaimed in surprise. From the garden too? When the guests tried the dessert, everyone agreed that it was incredibly delicious. Annie was delighted. She'd never tasted anything like it. It was so delicious. Shifa was also delighted. The pie was as sweet as honey. Senna cried out like a child. She was so happy. The adventurer with the gift of a huntress said, "It tastes excellent," and he could pick all this from his garden? Shifa and Senna asked for another piece of dessert. The protagonist happily treated the girls. He thought, sweets are popular with girls, aren't they? The protagonist's sister, watching her companions devour the pie with such relish, laughed and said, "She told them so. Her brother's gift is simply amazing." The girls agreed without hesitation. A little later, when the protagonist and Shifa stepped aside, he told the girl, "The garden is wonderful. They have all kinds of produce, and it's delicious too." The girl told him that God had given him such a wonderful gift. She looked at him, smiled, and added, "It's truly amazing." MC was simply melting at that moment. He couldn't believe she was smiling at him. He said, "He's so happy, and he did it especially for her." Shifa stopped smiling and asked him in bewilderment, "For her?" The protagonist became embarrassed and began to deny his words. "Nothing of the sort." He added, "There's still some left, so don't be shy. Eat it." Shifa thanked him. He wasn't sure he could entertain them properly, but looking at the girls, he understood that thanks to his gift, they were happy. He could even see Shifa's smile. He couldn't say if this would have been possible without his garden. It's simply amazing power. Finishing the prepared dishes, Annie said, "But still, no matter how delicious the produce is it really possible to grow so much and eat it all?" Gio replied that his sister was a big eater, but she couldn't handle everything. He thought, plus, they grew quickly and in large quantities. He and his sister couldn't fit that much. Annie looked at him carefully and told him she wanted to ask him something. Could she use some of the produce from their garden in their restaurant? Senna asked in surprise. A restaurant? The protagonist wondered, amazed. Her parents' restaurant? Arriving sometime later at the agreed-upon location, the protagonist saw a large crowd of people outside the restaurant. This surprised him. Even during lunch, there was a huge line. At that moment, two beauties in provocative outfits, Marsa and Lita, emerged from the restaurant and began inviting more customers. MC thought, now it was clear to him. If you looked closely, you could see that all the customers here were men. Marsa approached him, winked playfully, and asked him, what about him? His sister wants him to eat at their place. Gio was confused and began to refuse the girl's invitation. At that moment, Annie called out to him irritably and asked him what he was evading. They have a business meeting. He muttered that he knew. He just wanted to look. Marsa laughed, waved, and invited him to come visit them again. He knew Annie's house was literally across the street. He told her he hadn't realized a new restaurant had opened nearby. That's why he was curious. The allies approached Lucas's restaurant, which also served as Annie's parents' home. Entering, he asked the girl if it was still open, right? The girl answered that their restaurant used to be more prosperous, but some time ago, a competitor had appeared, and they'd lost their customers. The protagonist thought sadly. He'd often been here with Senna, and now it was sad to see it so deserted and abandoned. Annie continued. Their father had been gone for a long time. She was often away too, and her sister was doing the best she could. He said in surprise, Alicia? He knew she'd been helping out at the restaurant for a long time. She was always so kind and strong. At that moment, he heard Alicia apologize to them for keeping them waiting. They were welcome to the restaurant. The protagonist turned at the sound of her voice and was incredibly embarrassed by the girl's appearance. Annie angrily scolded her sister. She'd told her not to dress like that. Alicia, not the least bit embarrassed by her outfit, angrily replied to her sister, the restaurant next door is losing money. The only way to compete with them is to dress like them. The protagonist was astonished, naked but wearing an apron. Annie said bitterly, this makes me sad. She's already beautiful. Alicia playfully struck a striking pose and asked the protagonist, how do you like it? The MC hesitated, embarrassed, and said, it's certainly new to me, but she looks amazing. Annie exclaimed angrily. Enough! She was terribly sorry, but this plan had a fatal flaw. She pointed a finger at her sister and told her she didn't have a very developed figure. It was impossible to seduce a man if you didn't have anything. Alicia sank to the floor in shame and burst into tears, declaring, "There's nothing she can do about it," she exclaimed. Then she, Annie, will have to dress like that too. The girl cursed. What was she even talking about? She didn't want to do this, Alicia told her with a smile. Her figure will be a real sensation. Everything will be fine. Annie responded angrily. She doesn't want this, doesn't she understand? The embarrassed protagonist thought it seemed he should do or say something. Annie, looking at him, burning with shame, said, "She hopes," about what was just said. He didn't imagine it. While the protagonist was searching for an answer, the girl poked him painfully in the side. Alicia said sadly, "Of course, Annie is an adventurer, and she should be the one taking care of the restaurant." Annie was indignant. What was she talking about? The place was so important to her too. She wanted to help her too, but there was no need to go that far if they wanted to focus on the food. Alicia had rightly pointed out that they didn't have a distinguished menu, and the restaurant itself was so simple. If things continued like this, the restaurant they inherited from their father would go out of business. The protagonist was upset. He couldn't believe Alicia was so upset. This was important for both of them, for Annie too. For a second, he imagined how he and Senna could come here again and see the sisters' happy faces. He clenched his fists and addressed them decisively. The protagonist told Alicia that Annie had asked him to come here today. He thought he could help them with his gift. He would like to hope that he would be the one to save their restaurant. Opening the bag he'd brought with him, the protagonist showed them its contents. Alicia exclaimed in surprise, "How many ingredients are in there?" MC replied, "They were all picked from his garden." Annie added delightedly, she'd tried them before, and they were all delicious. Alicia, examining the fruits and vegetables more closely, admitted that they were indeed fresh and of good quality. She'd never seen anything like them before. She was especially intrigued by the burdock and perilla. She asked him what they were. Gio explained everything. Looking deeper into the bag, Alicia exclaimed in surprise, "What's in there? Is that really rice?" Annie asked in amazement. Rice? She'd heard of it, of course, but never seen it. Her sister confirmed that it was, and that it was rare in their area. Apparently, it wasn't harvested here, and it was rarely imported from other countries. Annie remembered seeing it at the market once, too. The protagonist was surprised. "Is it that rare?" Alicia, examining the rice in her hand, said, "But it wasn't that shiny and white, was it? It was supposed to be brown." The protagonist asked her, puzzled, "Is that so?" When he'd harvested it the usual way, it was already like this, so it was polished rice. Alicia was astonished and asked the protagonist, perplexed, what kind of garden was this? How could he have gathered such ingredients there? Annie told her, "That's outrageous, and they even have meat growing on the trees there." Her sister asked, "Is this really a regular garden?" She replied, "Well, yes, what else?" The girl suggested they all get back to business. She asked Alicia why she didn't try cooking something with these ingredients. She added sadly that she wouldn't want her sister to become like those touts at the neighboring restaurant. Alicia smiled at her, replied that she would try, and thanked them for the generous gift. The girl, without a moment's hesitation, set to work, her hands flickering with skill. The protagonist remarked, "Now that's mastery." Alicia replied, as Lucas's mistress, she usually doesn't show off her skills. The problem was the rice. At that moment, Annie called out to her, showed her the book, and exclaimed, "She found this in her father's room." This book explained how to cook rice. Alicia was delighted, saying how wonderful it was that they had a recipe. It can't be eaten raw. It's tough and tasteless. Annie, too, didn't know how to eat it properly. Alicia opened the book and exclaimed, "So what do they have here?" She recited the recipe in verse. Annie asked her, puzzled, "Is this a spell? Is it made with magic?" The sister answered, "No, it's hard to explain. It's about adjusting the heat. They should try it." She began cooking, saying, "Add plenty of water and stir." After a while, she told them with surprise and sadness that the rice had burned. After a while, after more attempts, she was upset. She was out of rice. Annie exclaimed in surprise, "So fast." At that moment, the protagonist told them he'd brought more. Alicia put the rice back on to cook. While waiting, she wondered, how will it turn out this time? At the end of cooking, she opened the lid of the pot. Annie exclaimed, "Smells good." The whole street heard Alicia's delighted cry, "Finally, they've succeeded." The method worked. After a while, the neighboring restaurant was crowded. William told his friend he was hungry. Wasn't it their turn yet? His friend told him to be patient. A pretty girl would serve him. That would be worth the wait. William agreed, but hunger was taking its toll. He wondered, surprised, what that delicious smell was. Alicia appeared before them with a tray of food and greeted them. She asked them if they would like to grab a bite to eat at Lucas. Everyone in line looked at her in surprise. William thought she was a real beauty. Alicia added that they had a new menu. At that moment, Annie came out in uniform. The protagonist asked her in surprise what was wrong with her outfit. She answered that she was helping her sister today, and therefore she had come up with a special uniform so that her sister would not look strange. She did not tell him how she and her sister had argued over the details of the outfit. Everyone who had come to the neighboring establishment talked in amazement. Was there really a restaurant across the street? They liked their waitress, and it smelled delicious. William and his friend went to the girls. He asked Alicia if they could order. The girl answered with a smile. Of course. Gradually, all the tables were taken. The protagonist brought William and his friend their order, thanked them for waiting, and announced the dishes they'd ordered. Perilla leaf rolls stuffed with meat and burdock roots, accompanied by potato salad, thick vegetable soup, and boiled rice. This is their establishment's special set meal. William was amazed. He stared at the tray of food in astonishment. Then he asked the protagonist, "Rice?" His friend exclaimed in surprise. It was the first time he'd seen it. How could an ordinary establishment serve such a rarity? He wondered what it would taste like. MC thought he was sure they'd love everything, since the two had put so much effort into preparing it. Besides, everything was grown in his garden. After tasting the rice, William exclaimed in surprise, "What is this?" It was simply insanely delicious. His friend remarked that it was so soft and fluffy. The more he chewed, the better he got. It was so delicious, really. He also admitted that the salad and soup were also something special, as was this meat. William added admiringly, and the perilla leaves were refreshing and added a piquant flavor to the dish. The burdock had such a pleasant texture. His delight knew no bounds. It simply couldn't be better. Rice and all these meat and vegetable delicacies. He could keep eating forever. He had never eaten anything like this before. This place was simply amazing. After a short while, he gasped. His rice was gone. Annie brought him a new dish. He stared at it in surprise. The girl looked at him with a smile and said, "He can eat as much rice here as he wants." Both boys were simply amazed by this. Those standing at the neighboring restaurant heard the customers at Lucas loudly demanding seconds, and everyone decided to go there. The sisters had already forgotten the last time their establishment had seen such a rush. Every seat was taken, and people kept coming, asking for tables. Annie, Alicia, and the protagonist were barely keeping up with the orders. Everyone was praising the food, many exclaiming that they'd never had a meal like it. At that moment, William turned to Gio and asked for an extra dish. The protagonist complied and looked at Alicia, who was beaming with joy. He thought, "I know, she's busy right now, but she looks so happy." Taking the extra order, he brought it to William and his friend. The guy, after trying it, remarked that this dish was also very good. His friend said he wondered where they got their ingredients. They were clearly a rarity, so good. The protagonist expressed his joy that they liked everything. He was about to tell them about his garden, but Annie interrupted him and motioned for him to be quiet. MC fell silent, and William asked him if something was wrong. Gio assured him it was okay, everything was fine. William, having eaten his fill, said he didn't know there was such a nice place around here. The one across the street has pretty girls, but the food here is tastier. He thinks he'll be a regular customer from now on. The protagonist replied that they'd be glad to see him there. He added that the food at Lucas's restaurant is delicious, and the owner is so sweet. Alicia laughed joyfully at his words. After seeing the last customer out, the girls closed the restaurant. Alicia thanked the protagonist heartily. She added that she can't remember when they had so many guests. She can't even believe it was empty just yesterday. He told her he was happy to help them. MC offered to continue cooking with his ingredients if they liked them so much. Alicia happily jumped at his offer and said she'd pay him handsomely for them. The protagonist objected, saying he didn't need money. Alicia exclaimed in surprise, "What is he talking about?" Out of the question. She didn't care that they were friends. As the restaurant owner, she couldn't fruits and vegetables from his garden for free. The protagonist was embarrassed by her assertiveness and replied that if she insisted, he had nothing against it. The girl said she would pay twice the market price for that taste. The MC said, "It's simple. She still has a lot of work to do, doesn't she?" She told him that she did. He laughed and said that in any case, he'd be happy if they could keep their establishment open. For now, they should agree on the market price, and when they could afford it, they'd reconsider the price. Alicia was incredibly touched by his understanding and innocence, and she thanked him profusely. Then she asked him what he thought of her older sister. Gio, not expecting such a question, answered her with confusion, saying she was a good girl. Alicia approached him and asked him, then, why doesn't he go for a walk with her? The protagonist hiccuped in surprise. At that moment, Annie walked in. Alicia greeted her and thanked her for her efforts. Annie irritably yelled at her not to play with Gio. He was an idiot and would take everything at face value. MC was indignant. Why was she talking about him like that? He understood. She was just teasing him. He was so surprised. Alicia said, "Okay, she'll just leave it at that." She approached Annie and whispered in her ear, "Let her watch. If she continues to do nothing, she might even steal him from her." After these words, she laughed, and Annie asked her in bewilderment, "What did she say?" She didn't understand what she was talking about. "Let her do what she wants," Alicia said with a smile. "She needs to go. She needs to prepare for tomorrow. She'll do everything she can to ensure Lucas's prosperity." The protagonist told Annie he was so glad Alicia was okay again. The girl replied, "Yes, indeed. She'd been so desperate that she'd completely lost control." Gio remarked, even surprised that everything had improved so quickly. Annie looked at him carefully and said she'd like to tell him something about his gift. In her opinion, it was in his best interests for others to know as little as possible. He looked at her, puzzled. The girl worriedly asked, What if someone unkind tries to abuse this amazing power? The protagonist asked her in surprise. Abuse, she continued. They can produce an infinite amount of valuable goods, for example, kidnap him, lock him up, and force him to endlessly grow ingredients. He was surprised by her words. Him, like a slave farmer? Annie added that she wasn't trying to scare him. She just wanted to remind him that he needed to be careful. He wondered if that was why she'd stopped him when he was about to tell William about his garden. He asked her in amazement, "Does that mean she cares about him?" Annie answered irritably, "She just doesn't want anything to happen to the restaurant." The main character grinned and said that everything was clear to him. He muttered that, in difficult times, it's important to have someone to talk to. He's glad he trusts Annie and the others and can discuss his difficulties with them. The girl heard his words and asked sheepishly, "Does he know that this time he literally saved her life?" She couldn't have helped him the way he had. MC smiled and said, "Don't even mention it. They've known each other since childhood, so it's all fine." She called him a good-natured idiot in response. He asked her again, "What did she say?" The girl turned around and said innocently, "She thanked him." He was surprised and asked her if she'd eaten anything strange. Such honesty was alarming. She laughed and remembered, oh right, she'd eaten meat from a tree. The protagonist said goodbye to the girl, and as he walked home, he thought he never would have imagined that Annie would one day thank him so sincerely, and it was also thanks to his gift. He was so happy that so many people had enjoyed the fruits of his gift today. But Annie was right. Abusing his gift could end badly. He had to be careful. The next day, Lily, returning from the market, thought, another good deal. Seeing so many people on the street, she exclaimed in surprise, wow, and where was the long line going? The last time she was here, the most popular spot was across the road, but now it was empty. She read the sign for Lucas's restaurant and exclaimed, there must be a secret to such success. Her blood boiled. Meanwhile, the protagonist exclaimed in dismay, oh no, not again. Senna asked him what had happened. He told her to let her look at this. Showing her a spoiled tomato plant, the protagonist exclaimed, they ate it. It's the crow's work. He's been having problems with them lately. Senna grabbed her sword and exclaimed, should she destroy them? He said, surprised. Destroy them? Aren't crows small fry for adventurers? She answered him, of course, just a little. The crows flew up to the garden, saw the girl with a weapon, and scattered in fear. Senna was surprised. What's going on? They weren't flying up at all. Geo answered her. That's strange because when he's alone, they often appear, he suggested. Could it be that they instinctively fear his sister? The girl asked in surprise. Does that mean they don't take him seriously? He good-naturedly advised her to shut up. Senna laughed and said, maybe she shouldn't be an adventurer after all. She could work here as a garden guard. The protagonist quipped back, she just wants to stay home. Okay, let her go already. Off to new adventures. They said goodbye, and Senna left. MC wondered what he should do. Thanks to his sister, they were gone for a while. The fence was useless against the birds, and he couldn't guard all the crops forever. Suddenly, he remembered the magic stones he'd accumulated. He thought he could level up with them. A voice answered. The magic stone had been used. The protagonist thought perhaps with his level up, he could somehow protect his garden from bird attacks. At that moment, the voice said, his level has increased to 10. The vegetable garden can be expanded and new skills can be unlocked. The protagonist was amazed. Finally, skills? At that moment, Lily called out to him and apologized for disturbing him. Geo was surprised by her visit and thought he would check everything later. He couldn't figure out who it was. The merchant greeted him and added that she was very pleased to meet him. She told him her name, Lily LaRuca, and told him that she was a merchant. The protagonist, surprised, thought, a merchant? He said, she's so petite, is she from the Lilliputian race? Lily answered him that it was true, and who was he? The protagonist introduced himself to her and asked her what he could do for her. The merchant said that, in fact, the Lucas restaurant, located nearby, had recently gained popularity for its delicious cooking. She was surprised when she tried it herself. The protagonist, smiling, noted that she was right. Lily wondered where they got such first-class ingredients. Here she apologizes, but she followed the restaurant, and that's how she ended up here. MC was surprised. What? Did that mean she was stalking him? The girl continued. But this house looks too ordinary for the source of such amazing ingredients. The protagonist asked her. He doesn't understand what she wants from him, and what's going on here anyway. He cursed silently. Who is she? Lily looked at him carefully and said, she thinks the gift might be involved. Geo stared at her in bewilderment. He immediately remembered Annie's words, that it was in his best interests if others knew as little as possible about his gift. What if someone bad tried to abuse this amazing power? He hesitated, not knowing what to say to her. He mumbled that it wasn't so. Lily laughed and exclaimed, was he really trying to deceive her? He's such a simpleton. It's written all over his face. He thought in surprise. A simpleton? He didn't know what to think. It was all a bit strange. What kind of person was she? After a while, he gave her some fruit from his garden to try. After tasting the apple, Lily exclaimed delightedly how delicious it was. Was this apple also from his garden? He told her that it was. She exclaimed, wow. Lily got straight to the point and offered him a partnership. While he blinked in surprise, she continued, currently he supplies products only to the Lucas restaurant. And with her help, these products will be sent to other shops and cafes. Is that interesting to him? The protagonist said in bewilderment. Well, even if that's true, so what? The merchant laughed and said, she understands that he is careful in his dealings. But they, hobbits, do not engage in deception on principle. Only honest trade. The protagonist thought, she really is a hobbit. Indeed, he had never heard of hobbits who cheat. They are an exceptionally intelligent and peace-loving people. Lily continued, saying that if he was worried, they could seal the deal with a magical contract. MC was surprised. A magical contract? She explained that such contracts were made to protect the deal, to ensure everything was done according to the rules and trade secrets were maintained. For example, a prohibition on disclosing magical secrets could be included in such a contract. The merchant asked him, so what? They'll make a deal and then discuss everything in more detail? The protagonist paused, and indeed, Shifa and the restaurant's customers had highly praised his products. It would be great to delight even more people with them. Trading wasn't his thing, but negotiating with an experienced merchant would be useful. Of course, he had his concerns, but she offered a magical contract. Finally, he made up his mind and told her he would sign the contract. Lily thanked him and handed him the contract. As the protagonist began to sign it, the aura around him lit up with a soft but bright light. The merchant told him that from this moment on, the magical contract would take effect. Now, they would discuss the details. The protagonist answered, of course. But first, he would show her his small vegetable garden. The girl asked him in amazement, a vegetable garden? When he brought her there, her admiration and amazement knew no bounds. She exclaimed, wow, what is this? Meat grows on a tree? Vegetables, fruits, mushrooms, anything. Gio said, in short, there was no need to plant seeds. Everything grows in about an hour. The harvest can be harvested instantly, and he can grow any variety and species here. After showing her everything in action, he concluded by remarking, well, something like that. She simply couldn't believe her eyes. The protagonist added that he could impart a refreshing taste or add sweetness. Basically, whatever and how much is needed for any taste. Lily whispered in amazement. She can't believe it. What a gift. MC asked her. Did she say something? The girl assured him it was nothing special. She was simply shocked. You won't find such quality on the market. The protagonist looked at her in surprise and thought, but that's not what she said. No, seriously. He was starting to suspect something was fishy here. Lily exclaimed in admiration, everything is simply first class. The protagonist thought he must have imagined it, but now he couldn't shake his suspicion. Gio said, no matter what anyone says, this growing technology is simply amazing. He recently developed new types of products. Lily was interested. What exactly? He answered her. For example, he started growing fish. Her amazement knew no bounds. She exclaimed, fish? Wasn't there enough meat on the trees? Now fish too? The protagonist said, no, fish don't grow on trees. They grow more like mushrooms, in garden beds. It seemed Lily was about to faint. What a surprise. She sniffed it, tasted it, and touched it. But no matter how she looked at it, it was clear it was the most natural fish. She said in surprise, you don't see something like that every day. The protagonist said, true, he doesn't know what to do with it. He doesn't know how to cook it. Should he dry it or smoke it? He doesn't even know. The vendor suggested that maybe they could celebrate their acquaintance with dinner. They would cook the fish together. While cooking, Lily confessed to him that she used to do business with fishermen, so she learned a thing or two from them. For example, this fish she was cleaning right now is called mackerel. After cutting it in half, the girl admired the fillet. Then she told the protagonist that he should cut it into 3 pieces. Lily remarked, how nice it was to work with such fresh fish. The protagonist asked her if it was possible to eat the fish raw. The vendor said she'd never heard of such a thing, but they could try different ways, since that's the case. He was the one cutting up the next fish, Lily giving him some pointers. He noticed it was complicated. After cutting, the girl added, now they need salt and oil, and some vegetables wouldn't hurt either. MC marveled at how much she knew about food. She told him that her job required her to interact with a lot of people and visit interesting cities. Gio exclaimed, sounds great. He'd like to travel too, or maybe even become an adventurer. Lily laughed and wondered how being able to grow meat on trees would help an adventurer. The protagonist laughed along with her. Finally, she lifted the lid of the pot and announced, I think the dish is ready. She served everything onto plates, and the protagonist remarked, everything looks so beautiful. He already wants to try everything. Lily placed a plate of food in front of him and said the name, fried fish à la meunière. Gio tried it and exclaimed in admiration, it's so tender. It wasn't like gnawing on dried roach. As he tried each dish, he couldn't stop admiring it. So soft, yet so deeply flavored. Could fish really be so juicy? He asked her what she thought of it. She cursed and exclaimed, it's almost too delicious. The protagonist shuddered in surprise. He hadn't expected such a reaction from her. The girl continued, it's quite fatty, moderately sweet, and the vegetable soup complements its flavor perfectly. After trying everything, she propped her cheek on her hand and exclaimed, everything is superb. She had never eaten such delicious fish anywhere. It was simply mind-blowing. The protagonist asked her in surprise, is everything all right? She looked at him in bewilderment, then laughed. Did she really say that out loud? He told her that it was true, and that she should speak more quietly next time. Lily said that she sincerely apologized to him for this familiarity. She had completely forgotten herself. She blushed with embarrassment and noted how ashamed she was. Gio replied that nothing was wrong. The dishes really were a hit. The vendor agreed with him. It really was. It was simply a masterpiece. The protagonist told her that it was all thanks to her. The girl countered, no, that's not true. It was all his. They argued for some more time until Lily burst out laughing. she suggested that they let it be a mutual concession. This, by the way, is the basis for fruitful cooperation. She added that now he could call her simply by her first name. The protagonist replied, okay. Now he wanted to grow more of this kind of fish. But if there were more fish, then he would have to grow less of everything else. If only he had a bigger garden, but here there's not much room to spread out. Lily thoughtfully noted that, of course, it's impossible to go beyond the boundaries of the plot. An idea occurred to him. He harvests quickly, so he'll rotate different crops. At that moment, the crows flew in again. The protagonist exclaimed angrily, there they go again. Look, they seem to be eyeing the fish. Well, he grabbed a shovel and rushed at the birds, shouting, they're no match for him. He swung his arm and hit them, but the crows quickly scattered. He began waving the shovel, yelling at them to get out. The pests! Lily, barely holding back her laughter, thought it was a bad start. Turning around, the protagonist saw that several crows had stolen his fish after all. He noted ruefully, they'd snatched theirs after all. The vendor asked him in surprise, is he okay? The protagonist answered, well, more or less, at least he'd managed to salvage something. They fly in flocks, you can't get enough food from them, but he won't let them fill their bellies without a fight. Lily remarked, yes, maybe he shouldn't be raising fish, MC told her sadly. But how could that be? Suddenly he remembered that he had acquired a new skill that morning. Here it is, creating a protector. A voice immediately asked him, should he create a protector? Gio exclaimed, yes. Lily muttered in confusion. Who is he talking to? At that moment, a golem began to appear right out of the ground, which greatly surprised not only the girl, but also the protagonist himself. In an instant, a simply enormous golem appeared before them, a fish tail sticking out from behind its head. MC asked him in bewilderment, will this be the one protecting his garden? The golem slapped its chest in agreement, and a dull ringing sound was heard. The protagonist exclaimed, excellent. Then let it go and disperse those crows. He pointed the golem in the direction. Lily, in a state of shock, asked him what was going on. Gio answered, that's part of his gift too. The girl looked at him in surprise. They began to watch what the golem would do. The protector rushed at the crows, swinging his fists, scattering them. But the birds began to pounce on him too. Lily exclaimed, the crows are attacking the golem in return. The protagonist exclaimed in admiration, how strong he is. He didn't have a scratch on him. The birds also looked at their opponent in bewilderment. The protector began swinging his fists again, and finally drove away all the annoying birds. When they retreated, the protagonist joyfully shouted, hooray, that's what they got. He really gave them the beating. Lily couldn't believe how powerful the golem's blow was. What if he used it for evil? The protagonist patted the golem's body and with a smile praised him. Well done, he tried hard. Everything turned out just fine. The MC turned to the astonished girl and shouted, don't worry now, the harvest will be safe. She replied, okay. She said goodbye to the protagonist and left. The protagonist thought, well, Lily has returned to her room to prepare the deal. She told him they'd see each other again. The garden is protected thanks to the golem. The days passed calmly and peacefully. A couple of days later, the merchant came to him again and thanked him. The protagonist replied, it's nothing. Is everything ready yet? The girl confirmed that it was. She added, in fact, she bought the plot next to him. There was an empty house next to it, so she bought it. Gio exclaimed in surprise, why did she do that? Lily laughed and said, she's handing it over to him, the whole plot. He thought he misheard her. What did she mean? She's handing over the plot to him? She gave him the vacant land so easily? This is serious business. The merchant told him she really wanted him to harvest as much as possible. If he increased the area planted, there would be more. The protagonist looked puzzled. But what about the money she spent? It was no small sum. She told him not to worry about it. She was giving it to him for free. His astonishment knew no bounds. Was this really normal? Lily said pompously, it's an investment in business development. She believed that the purchase of the plot would soon result in huge profits. The girl laughed and added, besides, she thinks this will strengthen the trust between them. He thought in surprise, trust. The protagonist smiled and thanked her for such a luxurious gift. Shaking her hand, he thanked her again and invited her to continue working together and develop the business. The merchant agreed. Continuing to shake her hand, he thought, I'm completely sure this person can be trusted. Lily continued briskly, well, let's get down to business. First, they need to demolish the abandoned house. MC told her it wouldn't be a problem. The girl didn't understand what he was talking about. The voice said a new plot had been opened. Should he convert the land for planting? The protagonist answered, yes. The voice asked him, do you want to install a new fence? He answered, yes. Lily didn't understand what was happening. The house had vanished in an instant. When everything was ready, MC exclaimed in delight, what a huge plot. Just how much could be grown here? Lily looked carefully at the spot where the house had stood, at the fence, at the cleared and plowed land, and muttered, yes, now that's what she calls a magical gift. The protagonist leaned on the golem and looked at his partner with a smile. She handed him the money and said it was payment for today's deal. The protagonist was surprised. So much? He thought he should hide it from Senna for now. Senna entered the garden and exclaimed in surprise at how huge it had become. What was going on? When did they manage to do it? Gio said he'd been given this land, so now they could grow even more stuff. She exclaimed, yes, indeed, so many things. So many meat trees, and all the different kinds of meat. And what's this? He said it's fish, and it's delicious. Senna happily jumped on the golem and said they now have more golems. The protagonist agreed, but they weren't the most obedient. Senna happily remarked on the abundance. It would be great to have gardens like this all over the world. The protagonist replied that, unfortunately, this would only work on his plot. There were space limitations too. He opened the system window and asked what they'd harvest next. He could now grow medicinal herbs, she asked. Even AIM. MC was surprised and asked if she knew what kind of herb it was. Senna replied that health-restoring potions made them do that. Usually, it could be bought at pharmacies, but there's been a shortage lately because potion makers have to wait for the next harvest of this herb. Shifa also has problems because of this and can't complete the dungeon. She smiled and said she should rest. Geo thought about it. Exploring dungeons without potions is difficult. Shifa will be happy if he manages to harvest AIM. After a while, he was carrying a bag and noticed that he had harvested AIM. What kind of pharmacy had Senna mentioned? He approached an abandoned house and thought fearfully, abandoned? There's a chart here, so what kind of owner would such a pharmacy be? He entered and walked forward fearfully, noticing the gloomy atmosphere and flasks of potions on the shelves, an eerie place and no one there. The protagonist saw a silhouette and wanted to say he came to give it to him, but he approached Dennis and asked, "Is this his pharmacy?" He sheepishly replied that he was a salesperson and pharmacist's assistant. The protagonist wondered why he was dressed like a maid. Dennis asked awkwardly, "Isn't that weird?" He remarked that his uniform simply didn't fit the overall atmosphere. Marin emerged from the shadows and said it was a special uniform. Dennis called out to her in surprise, and she greeted the MC. She hadn't seen him there before. Geo, perplexed, thought he'd seen a living dead man. This abandoned house suited her perfectly. Dennis petulantly called out to her and offered to make a different uniform. Marin refused, saying it was the manager's orders. The protagonist thought, the shop is in such an unsightly location. Cute uniform, so as not to scare away visitors. He turned to Denis and asked him not to be shy. It suited him very well. Denis replied with displeasure that he hated the uniform because he was a boy. Marin shouted that he wasn't a boy. He was cute. Denis, perplexed, asked, "What the hell is this?" "He's just an ordinary boy," Marin asked. "What is he talking about? His eyes are big, his cheeks are so soft, and the apron suits him so well. Is she making this up? He was born so sweet." The protagonist looked at them in confusion and was about to leave, when Denis suddenly stopped him and asked, "He came here on business, didn't he?" He agreed. He was collecting ingredients for a health potion and wanted to ask if they would buy it. Denis and Marin looked at this in surprise and asked, "A real AIM?" The protagonist asked, "So will this be useful?" Dennis agreed. "It's all top quality." Marin touched the sprouts with her fingers and said she couldn't even believe it. This is a product so fresh and energetic. This AIM will make a first-class health potion. MC asked in surprise, "First class?" Dennis said that potions vary in quality. They are valued differently depending on their effectiveness. The higher the class, the more valuable the potion. Marin, with her gift, can judge the quality of a potion at a glance. Denise looked at the AIM in admiration and exclaimed he'd never seen such large AIM leaves. Where did he collect it? Geo awkwardly said it was a secret. Denise happily said that this year's AIM wasn't very good because of the weather, and he found such a good one. The protagonist smiled, saying, "Nothing special." Marin's gaze became so frightening. Marin wondered why Dennis liked him so much. Why was he praising him? The protagonist called out to her, and she asked what was wrong. He replied that he had a favor to ask. His sister, Senna, was an adventurer. Dennis happily exclaimed she often came to see him in Shifa, so they were related. The protagonist said he would sell them the AIM at a discount, and in exchange, when the potion was ready, could he sell it to him specifically? Marin agreed. Shifa's squad was their regular customers anyway, but she also had a condition. He thought, maybe she wants even more AIM? She exclaimed with displeasure that sweet Dennis was hers and only hers, that she was his love. After MC left the pharmacy, he thought, this Mrs. Marin, but now the health potion will be back on sale and then Shifa will thank him. He smiled slyly, lost in thought. Meanwhile, at the pharmacy, Dennis said he should have asked him to bring more of the same raw material and more. Marin said it was very high-quality AIM, but she would never trade it for AIM. Dennis asked in confusion, is it her again? She thought. But this really is AIM of exceptional quality. Where did he get it? Marin poured the potion into a flask, when suddenly she noticed something. Dennis happily asked, well, is it first class? Marin exclaimed. Perhaps this potion is simply of unprecedented quality. You can't just sell something like that. It needs to be diluted. Meanwhile, Senna called out to Geo and exclaimed, she bought a whole bunch of health potions. Did he bring those medicinal herbs to the pharmacy? Shifa was overjoyed and asked to thank him on her behalf. The protagonist happily asked, is that true? Or maybe a date as a token of gratitude, perhaps? Senna noted, but now she was off on a long raid, as usual. The protagonist added, is she at it again? Will she cause Shifa problems again? Senna petulantly replied, that's slander. She's quite the warrior, and she's absolutely indispensable in dungeons. MC remarked that she was still young. Sometime later at the dungeon, Annie warned them about a monster ahead, and Senna rushed towards it to attack. Shifa said, just a little longer, after which her hand filled with magic. She'll cover. Senna swung her sword and deftly cut the monster in half. Annie praised her for defeating the blood grizzly so easily. She smiled and said it was all because they had her back. Annie replied that it was all her and her skills. Shifa agreed. She hadn't interfered much this time. It was all her gift, the favor of the sword god, and she was a quick learner. They were moving so quickly into the dungeon. Shifa noted that it was all thanks to Gio. It was dangerous to go down into the dungeon without a health potion, so he had really helped them out. Senna smiled and said he was all embarrassed when she conveyed her thanks to him. Annie asked, "So this was the protagonist's potion?" Suddenly, she blocked their path and said there was someone up ahead. She could sense two people, but very faintly. It sounded like a wounded person. Then they ran into the dungeon and noticed two bodies. Shifa exclaimed, "We need to help them quickly. What's wrong with them?" Senna was about to take the potion out of her pocket when suddenly a monster appeared behind her. Annie gave her a hint, after which she jumped aside. "Are these friends of the one they defeated earlier?" Annie apologized and asked Senna to distract them for a moment. Shifa added that these wounds were also the work of monsters. Senna said everything was fine and they could rely on her, and they should protect the wounded. She thought about the three of them. Defeating one was easy, but fighting three while covering the girls was the only way. Annie exclaimed, "It looks like more are approaching. There will be even more monsters here soon." Senna asked in confusion, "Even more?" Suddenly, warriors emerged from the dungeon and began attacking the monsters. Shifa thought they were reinforcements and, using the Empress Prestige skill, made Senna's body light in combat. She drew her sword and said she would deal with them. Senna deflected the monster's attack and bounced off the wall, plunging her sword into the enemy's head. She landed on the ground and said, "Now we need to hurry and help." Senna turned and saw Elizabeth behind her. She was perplexed when she noticed it was Shifa's squad. Annie and Shifa looked at her in surprise and exclaimed, "She just saved them." Elizabeth asked if anyone was wounded. Annie agreed. They needed a potion quickly. They'd try applying it to their wounds. Elizabeth remarked that their wounds were so terrible that they needed a whole barrel of it. She ordered her warriors to bring her all their potions. The boy remarked, but if it was a first-class potion, they wouldn't need much. Annie dripped the potion onto the girl's body, when suddenly a magical radiation appeared above her, beginning to heal her. Everyone watched in amazement, noticing how quickly the wounds were healing. The girls came to their senses and looked at their bodies in amazement. Were those terrible wounds completely healed? Afterwards, they thanked Shifa's squad, and Elizabeth asked if they were lost, or if their squad had left. They could go with them then. They'd find them along the way. Shifa said they'd have a look around. Elizabeth remarked that the potion that healed them seemed to be not just first class, but superb. Where did they get it? Shifa answered awkwardly, "At the apothecary run by Mrs. Marin." Elizabeth remarked, "So she's a skilled pharmacist. She'll remember." After she left, Senna added how beautiful she was. Shifa said she and Elizabeth had once made a pact. She knew her. Annie remarked, "That's what a B-class warrior is. You can rely on her." She noticed, but for some reason she constantly changes her squad's composition, even though her comrades are invariably professionals. Annie thoughtfully replied, "That's strange." Senna said, "Okay, that's fine, but their potion is even stranger. What an effect, it healed the most severe wounds. It's definitely better than first class. Superb quality, but she'd never heard of such a thing." Annie examined the potion and asked how they brewed such a good potion. Senna exclaimed, "It's the protagonist. This is all his fault." Meanwhile, MC approached the pharmacy and saw Denny seeing off customers. He called out to him. Everyone was simply delighted with the new potion. "It's all thanks to his herbs." Gio smiled and agreed. He'd already heard about it from Senna. He thought about it, healing wounds incompatible with life. He was so glad he helped Shifa. Glad he could be of use to her. The protagonist noticed that he had brought a fresh batch of aim. Dennis asked in surprise, "So many already?" Marin peeked around the corner and quietly greeted the protagonist. He wondered if she was spying on him again. Dennis called out to her and said that MC had brought more aim. Marin picked up the aim and thanked him happily. It really was thanks to his herbs that they now had so many customers. Even though they dilute the potion many times, there was such a rush. Gio awkwardly said that while he certainly grows aim, brewing potions was beyond him. Dinas told Marin she was so skilled. She joyfully grabbed the protagonist's hands and said, "It's all his, all thanks to him." The protagonist, perplexed, said he'd bring them more medicinal herbs. Meanwhile, Senna poured a magic stone onto the ground and joyfully exclaimed, "There are so many magic stones here." MC noticed that, thanks to the health potion, they were now progressing very quickly. Inspired by the success of the medicinal herbs, he decided to check out what other possibilities would open up with each new level. The system notified him that his level had increased. A new type of fence had been unlocked, new skills had been discovered, and new types of products had been unlocked. Gio exclaimed, "So much! Is that a new skill? Can you grow eggs?" The protagonist said he was very curious. Suddenly, an egg emerged from the sprout, and it had finally grown. The protagonist looked at it and exclaimed, "What an egg!" They said it was small, but in reality, it was huge. What would hatch from this egg? A monster? He's made friends with the golem. But what about raising the monster? What should he even do with it? He hopes he'll figure it out somehow. Picking an egg from a branch is easy, but what about the rest? Suddenly, Lily came to him, and MC put the egg in the bushes. Lily said she'd heard about the new super potions. Was this all his doing? So his medicinal herbs are really good too? That's great, so many useful plants. The aim alone is worth something, and here's a whole field of others. He's doing a good job without her. The protagonist agreed. He'll try to grow that too in due time. What about monsters and magical creatures? Lily said she handles that too. There's demand, some for raw materials, some for other uses. The protagonist asked, but these are already adult monsters, and what about the eggs? Lily noted in surprise. She'd never seen those for sale. Real living monsters are rare. They're naturally violent, incompatible with humans. Who would ever think of raising a monster and living with it? She doubted she'd be able to sell the egg. After she left, MC looked at the egg and wondered if it was incompatible with humans. While it was small, he'd deal with it if necessary. Maybe it would be better not to let it hatch? Suddenly, the egg began making sounds, and he looked at it in surprise. Had he moved? Meanwhile, night had fallen, and Gio was sitting on the porch of the house. Senna was still late today. The sun was already setting, but even so, he felt somehow warm inside. Afterwards, Senna ate and thanked him. He asked if she had a good appetite as always. Had she had to work today? Senna agreed, fighting the monster again. The protagonist looked away and wondered. With a monster? Confused, she asked what he was doing. MC replied that he was preparing for the harvest tomorrow. He asked if monsters were really that violent. Senna exclaimed, "Oh, they are. Does he remember those girls they saved? The monster would have ripped their bellies open with its claws, if not for his potion." Gio thought uncomfortably, so they really are incompatible. She suddenly approached the golem and hugging it, asked if there were kind monsters like his golem, ones you could befriend. He must be lonely. She's always away, and a monster like that would be like family. The protagonist smiled and added, but he wouldn't say it's hard without her. Even when she's home, he's still lazy, right? He's not lonely, but his parents died very early, and she's his sister, now constantly wandering. He picked up the egg and asked, how is he doing here? Suddenly, the egg began to move again, and he decided he would raise it. He would take good care of it. The protagonist opened the system window and said that he needed to grow some food for it in advance. What kind of monster is he? What would he call it? After MC finished working, he said he'd had enough for today and would check the egg. The monster was moving more and more often. It seemed like it would hatch soon. He picked it up and suddenly felt cold, although it had been warm. What's going on? How's the monster inside? He needs to warm it up quickly. A few minutes later, he wrapped the egg in a blanket and said it seemed a little warmer, but he was still restless. Senna was having a sleepover today. He thought he could sleep with the egg next to him. Gio lay down in bed and, putting the egg next to him, began to fall asleep, wishing it would hatch soon. A few hours later, he heard the crackling sound coming from the egg and looked at it in surprise. Is it hatching? What should he do? Could this help? The protagonist began to cheer him up, and then a cat hatched from the egg. He happily thought, is this the monster? It looks like just a kitten. It seems weak. What should he do? The protagonist approached a fruit-bearing tree and exclaimed, I need to feed it some milk. There were braids of milk on the tree. Perhaps a drink wouldn't hurt. MC picked a coconut and began to cut it open, pouring the contents into a bowl. Gio exclaimed happily, it smells so good. He placed the bowl of milk in front of the cat and asked if he would drink it. Milky licked the contents, suddenly liking it and happily drinking it. The protagonist exclaimed joyfully, it worked. He drinks a lot. As always, the garden provides everything he needs, so there's plenty to feed him. He already looks more cheerful, and he'll grow big. He asked not to rush to drink it all at once, or he might get a stomachache. The protagonist put his hand out to Milky, who suddenly began to cuddle with it. He joyfully exclaimed, what a cute and fluffy kitten. He's worried about being considered a monster, but he thinks, as a cat, she could easily be a pet. What should he name her? MC watched her and came to his senses. He'll call her Milky, since he loves milk. A few hours later, Senna came home and asked in surprise, what the hell is this? Gio said he'd be living with them now. Senna asked, is it a kitten? Did he pick it up? Gio agreed and thought, isn't he going to tell anyone he hatched from a monster egg? She tried to pet him, but Milky bit her, and Senna asked angrily, does he bite? Gio asked, is that even possible? Why did she immediately reach out to grab him? She'd scared the kitten. Senna exclaimed petulantly, but he's more worried about the cat than about her. The beast took her brother. Senna started fighting Milky, saying that he was her brother, her sister, not him. Gio served Senna dinner and gave Milky milk. Senna, perplexed, asked, did he grow milk in the garden? She wanted it too. After dinner, she drank a glass of milk and joyfully exclaimed how delicious it was. So sweet. The protagonist licked his lips and thought how wonderful it was to pick such delicacies from the garden. They were truly delicious. And now they were like a real family. Their little family had grown, which was yet another reason to grow and sell more. The next day, the protagonist came to the pharmacy and met Marin and Denise. He said that today wasn't just AIM, but also something new. They looked in surprise at the many different herbs, and he asked if there was anything they could use. Marin agreed. They were all rare. Was that the Hiyari herb? She'd never seen it in person, and you could make an ice potion from it. MC asked, ice potion? Marin agreed. If she drank it, no fire or heat would harm her. Dennis added that, depending on the composition, potions could have a wide variety of effects. Gio remarked that an ice potion would probably be useful to an adventurer. Marin agreed, especially in the most inaccessible parts of the underground world, like the crater of a volcano. Meanwhile, Senna and the others were moving through the dungeon. She sighed heavily and said that it is very hot here. Annie agreed. She thought she'd soon evaporate. Shifa remarked that it was because there was a volcano ahead. Senna asked in surprise, "Volcano?" Enya agreed that this dungeon had levels of varying difficulty. Shifa added that they'd already completed the cave level, and after that, a volcanic level awaited them. There was also a forest level, a ruin level, and an underwater level. There were 5 in total, each with its own conditions and monsters. The underwater level was the hardest. No one had yet been able to complete it. That's why it ranked among the most difficult levels. The volcano, the extreme heat it radiated, so few could boast of having conquered it. Senna inquired about how to complete this level. Annie replied that they needed to defeat all the bosses that inhabited it. If they won, they'd done it. Defeating the bosses yielded huge rewards. Plus, they could pick up many valuable items to sell. Senna asked in surprise, so they were going to fight the volcano bosses? Would it work? Annie said that the terrible heat had held them back until now, since they didn't have any water magic. Senna asked, "Maybe that's enough for today then?" Annie called out to Shifa, who pulled a potion out of her backpack and said it was the color she'd never seen before, like pure ice. It was an ice potion. A trial batch from Marin. If you drink it, you won't be afraid of either heat or fire. Senna asked in confusion, "So they're really going to go into the volcano?" Shifa agreed, giving her the potion for free, but on the condition that they test it. Annie asked how she brewed such a wonderful potion. Shifa replied that she'd been brought a rare herb, hiari, and brewed it from that. She bought it from Gio. Senna petulantly asked, "Why?" Shifa said that now everyone needed to drink the potion. After drinking it, they noticed how they were starting to freeze. Senna sneezed and exclaimed, "And they were just dying from the heat." Shifa said they needed to hurry into the volcano. A few minutes later, they reached the volcanic level, and Shifa noticed there was a volcano. The ground was scorching hot. Annie exclaimed, "There's lava there." Senna said happily, but strangely, it felt so pleasantly cool. The temperature was just right, so it was working, and the protagonist and Marin were doing well. Annie approached the lava and said nothing was happening, and she wouldn't risk swimming in it. Senna was about to touch it, when Shifa suddenly ordered her not to. Suddenly, fiery monsters appeared next to them, after which they assumed a fighting stance. It seemed they would be stronger than anyone they'd fought. Senna swung her sword and deftly dispatched the monsters, asking, "Is that all?" Shifa noted in surprise that the sword strike had weakened his flames. It seemed he'd been hit with a chill. Wasn't that thanks to the potion? The effect lasted quite a long time. Annie added that it seemed easy for Marin and MC to produce this potion. Now other squads will want to buy it, and there will be demand. Senna agreed. Should they move on? Shifa agreed. They won't be lost with the potion, and will deal with the boss. Meanwhile, the protagonist exclaimed joyfully, "And today they will harvest an excellent harvest of hiari grass. He will do anything, if it means Shifa." He opened the system window and said there was one more thing he still hadn't tried. Was this some kind of improved fence? The system asked if he wanted to build a wall. The protagonist agreed, but suddenly high walls began to rise from the ground, enclosing the plot. He thought in confusion, was this a fortress wall? But why would this happen around an ordinary garden? MC cancelled the wall construction and said he didn't need such a wall. He looked at the next skill, and the system asked again if he wanted to hide the area. Gio agreed, but after looking around, nothing happened. Usually, the effects manifest immediately. Then he would check out the new varieties. It seemed like nothing new had been added, but suddenly there were products of superior quality. The protagonist exclaimed in surprise. They used to be average quality, and now they were high quality. If average was so tasty, then these were even tastier? After a while, Senna said exhaustedly how tired she was in that dungeon. She wished she could get into a soft bed. Suddenly, she looked at the plot and asked, "What's going on?" The protagonist greeted her and asked, "What's wrong?" She asked, "Where did they come from?" The MC, perplexed, asked, "Where?" Gio led her into the house, and she asked in surprise, "How is that possible?" He replied, "He was just trying out new skills. The neighbors were probably surprised too, so he won't use this skill anymore." He called up the system window and cancelled the plot hiding skill. Senna sighed with relief. She was so tired, she thought she'd have to sleep outside. The protagonist noticed she could barely move. Senna exclaimed, "It's all his fault. Did he give Marin more herbs again?" So they spent the whole day climbing around the volcano. The protagonist was surprised and thought about how they were actively going through the levels, while he was just sitting there collecting herbs and couldn't even see them off. So they've completed the first level of the dungeon? How about celebrating with dinner? Senna asked excitedly. Dinner? MC asked her to calm down and invite the girls too. He would take care of dinner and cook everything. Senna exclaimed happily. This was really motivating. Day after day, Marin created new potions and Shifa's squad completed different levels of the dungeon. They entered the dungeon and Annie said, "They're here. This is the boss, the red lizard, aka Volcano." Senna noted in surprise how huge he was, and how tough his scales were. It seemed like no one had defeated him in years. He was definitely the strongest opponent they'd faced. What would they do? Shifa said they would fight. They could definitely do it. Senna was in the center, attacking from all sides, joining forces. There was enough potion, so they drank some more just in case. Senna drank the potion and said there was nothing to be done. They'd deal with the lizard and have a delicious dinner. They took up their swords, and Shifa gave the order to begin the battle. Her prestige as empress increased the strength of allies and decreased that of enemies. The monster roared, and Senna exclaimed in surprise, What a roar, he really was a hot guy. Shifa thought he was distracted by Senna. He seemed to be gathering his strength. He was watching her closely. Getting closer wouldn't be easy. Annie hid behind a rock, letting him try to find her. He couldn't beat her hunting instincts. Shifa fired a magical blast at him, and Annie jumped in front of the monster, swinging her knife, leaving a wound on his body. She said she'd succeeded. She'd wounded him. This potion is really powerful. Senna happily said, "You caught him off guard. Great job." Shifa remarked that they were truly strong when they worked together. She praised Annie and she said, not without her help. Shifa, Annie, and Senna gathered their strength to attack the monster again. They would strike together with force once again. Meanwhile, in the Adventurers Guild, Canaria greeted Shifa and asked how things were going. Did she have a new warrior in her party? Shifa agreed. It was Senna, her old friend. Canaria thought that she certainly always gives it her all. But lately, dungeons have been getting harder and harder. At that time, this girl didn't seem super strong. Perhaps she was still a newbie and still learning. Senna asked contentedly what would be for dinner. Canaria inquired, "So, what are your plans for today? Have you come to report your successes?" Shifa agreed. They wanted to report on today. She placed the scale on the table, and Annie said it was a volcano scale. This was their report. They defeated the boss on the volcano. Canaria looked at the other adventurers in fear and asked, "So this is true?" Annie and Senna covered their ears at how loud it was. Shifa agreed. Those scales were proof of that. Canaria noted that those were definitely the scales of a red lizard, and not just any lizard. They were so huge. Did they team up with another squad? Senna said with a smile that they did it all themselves. The boss's body was still there and they needed to get it out. Canaria awkwardly said that they needed to send out scavengers, but the equipment for traversing the volcano wasn't ready. Annie stopped her, saying that wasn't necessary. Canaria, confused, asked, "What does she mean?" She held out a potion and said, "There's an ice potion. If she drank it, even the crater of a volcano would be cool." Canaria thought in disbelief. They defeated the volcano boss? Such green girls? And she'd never even heard of a potion. Suddenly she started calling the guildmaster at the top of her voice. After a while, the adventurers drank the potion and, upon entering the dungeon, felt nothing. It really didn't burn at all. What a miracle potion. They thanked them for their assistance. They wouldn't let them down. Senna said the lizard was over there. They should go there quickly. The adventurer wondered if that would really be enough. Shifa was only 18 years old, and she was already a rank B warrior. Who would have thought? She defeated such a huge monster as a volcano. Annie pointed towards the monster. It was ahead. The adventurers looked at the volcano in surprise and exclaimed, "It's incredible." The man remarked in amazement, "Look at that body. He can't believe it's a volcano." The main thing was that it was almost undamaged, meaning they could make a good profit selling its scales. Senna happily asked, "Is that true?" The adventurer agreed. How did they manage to pack it away so neatly? Usually monsters taken in battle are badly damaged. Here, the scales were pierced with a single blow. Who could have delivered such a powerful blow? It must have been Shifa or Annie. Annie said she didn't know how to wield a sword like that. The guy laughed and said, "No way. The youngest one isn't even 18. Senna smiled and exclaimed, "She did it because she's the strongest with a sword." A few hours later, Senna poured out the magic stones, and Gio exclaimed in surprise, "More magic stones, and so many." She said the reward depended on the monster's level, and everyone in the guild was surprised too. The boss was strong, so they were rewarded accordingly. Suddenly, Milky started meowing, and he asked if he wanted to be petted too. She asked, "What's he praising him for?" The protagonist remarked, "It's like therapy. It feels so good right away." Senna indignantly asked, "Isn't it nice to pet your beautiful, gorgeous sister?" The protagonist asked her not to be so jealous. Milky was still little. She looked at him in surprise and asked how he'd grown so quickly in just a couple of days. Too fast for a cat. MC awkwardly turned away, noticing he'd completely forgotten he'd better go and upgrade the garden with those magic stones. The system notified him that his level had increased, new skills had been unlocked, and new crops were available. He looked at the system window and asked, "What kind of skill is that?" It said he'd received the gift of a vegetable garden. Gio thought he'd pretend he hadn't seen anything. Senna, perplexed, asked what's wrong. She had the day off starting tomorrow. The protagonist said, "That's wonderful. If that's the case, then she could invite the girls and have a feast. They'd have a great celebration for completing the dungeon." The protagonist set the table, and Senna exclaimed delightedly, "It looks magnificent." Enya remarked in surprise, unable to believe he prepared so much. MC replied that Alicia had helped him. She said Lucas was reserved for them today. And of course, all the ingredients were taken straight from Gio's garden. They'd cook as much as they wanted, so they could eat as much as they wanted. Shifa smiled and thanked them, and then the three of them drank to victory in the volcano area. Annie looked at the food and exclaimed, "This Hamburg steak looks amazing." Shifa agreed. It looked delicious. Senna quickly began cutting the food and said that her mouth was watering just from the sight of it. She wanted to try it. The protagonist noted that he had prepared it using open, high-quality cultures. He looked at them and asked in confusion. Everyone froze. "What's wrong?" Annie jumped up from the table, and Shifa asked, "What just happened?" He asked, "Does it really taste bad?" Senna tasted the food and exclaimed, "It's so delicious. So good it could make you faint." Annie said she couldn't stop. Shifa put down a piece of food and said she also wanted to keep eating it forever. Suddenly, they started asking for seconds, and the protagonist asked them to control themselves. High-quality cultures are more than dangerous, prepared with average quality ingredients. Senna exclaimed happily, "Delicious. The tender meat and crispy onions go perfectly together." Shifa remarked, "The meat is juicy and incredibly savory." Annie agreed, "It's simply wonderful." Shifa remarked, "The previous one was terribly delicious. War should be expected from such ingredients." MC asked in surprise, "That delicious?" Annie remarked disapprovingly, "If some bad organization gets involved with them, they could easily manufacture illegal substances. He should hide this somewhere safe." Shifa smiled and said, "Nevertheless, she's so happy to receive such a nice reward," and thanked him. Gio said, "No problem, it's the least he can do since he cares about Senna." Shifa remarked, "She's very talented in her own right." Annie said they were only able to get through the volcanic regions so quickly thanks to her. Senna chuckled awkwardly and exclaimed, "She's done her part." The protagonist wondered if Senna's gift was truly that powerful. Previously, he thought she was simply exaggerating. Now that he could at least do something for them, he was still envious. Shifa called out to him and said she was very grateful not only to Senna, but to him as well. She didn't think they could have gotten past the volcanic zone or defeated the boss without his ice potions. He too was incredibly powerful. Annie noted with satisfaction that he had made healing potions for them and provided strong logistical support. Senna agreed. Advancing deeper into the dungeon was quite difficult. The protagonist thought apparently he had been useful too. Alicia asked him why didn't he sit down too. She would take care of the rest. MC smiled and thought, even if he couldn't be an adventurer, it seemed he had still managed to become part of the group. A few minutes later, the plates on the table were empty. Annie said heavily, "I can't eat another bite." Senna happily thanked her for the food, and Gio thanked Alicia. She said, "Judging by how much everyone ate, the food was very appetizing. Will they be leaving again soon?" Shifa agreed. Sometimes they take a break from adventures. Annie said she thought she could help out at the restaurant. Senna exclaimed happily, and she'd been sleeping all this time. The protagonist wondered what Shifa had planned for this. After Annie saw the guys off and he said that he and Senna would go this way, she suddenly stopped him and said that she wanted to thank him. MC asked in surprise, "Thank him?" Shifa agreed. For today's food and potions. He became embarrassed and wondered if she really liked him. Shifa asked if they would go for a walk tomorrow. Gio, perplexed, thought, "Is this a date?" The next day, Senna woke up and asked if he was going somewhere. He was really dressed up. The protagonist agreed contentedly, and after patting Milky, said that Senna would take care of him today. He left, silently apologizing if he didn't return by the end of the day. Today, he would be alone with Shifa. In other words, they were on a date. They would go to stylish date spots and create a good atmosphere. He approached Shifa, and she wished him good morning. He looked at her sheepishly and wished her good morning in return, then apologized. Had he kept her waiting? Shifa noticed that she had just arrived. The protagonist thought about it, exchanging typical date phrases. Where should they go? She replied that she already had an idea. She asked him to leave everything to her, as she wanted to thank him today. The MC turned away and happily thought, Shifa had planned a date especially for him. He was so happy he couldn't keep a straight face. There was no doubt today would be a great day. A few minutes later they arrived at the pharmacy. He asked, "This is Marlene's pharmacy, right?" Shifa agreed and walked inside. Dennis greeted her cheerfully. "Is it just the two of them today? Do they need something?" Shifa said they were just looking around. The protagonist looked at Dennis, his expression saying they clearly weren't in such an abandoned building for a date. This place definitely wasn't for dates. Shifa was silently staring at the objects. What were they even doing here? He was happy just spending time with her, but he wondered what she was thinking. Shifa looked at him and asked if he was having fun. The protagonist awkwardly agreed and thought he'd just been staring at her this whole time. Dennis walked them out and Shifa said they needed to find their way here now. He thought, this place isn't for dates either, and again she's silently staring at the objects. But is this normal? He had never been on a date before, but didn't they usually involve fashion stores? He imagined her trying on different clothes and wondered if it was supposed to be something like this. A salesman came up to them, greeted them, and said that he had recently added a new item. Would they like to try it on? She put on a set of armor, and he was surprised to say that she looked very strong. However, she found this armor heavy. After which, she put on a bikini armor and said that this set was light enough. He felt embarrassed by this and asked loudly, "Isn't it too much?" She looked at him and asked which armor looks better. She liked the light one better, but it seemed like he didn't like it very much. He covered his eyes with his hand and said loudly that it wasn't that. He just thought she looked better in her regular clothes. She felt a little embarrassed by this compliment and her face blushed. They left the store, and he asked if she wanted to buy anything. She refused. They came to the Adventurers Guild, and she said that they needed to go here next. Gio was a little unhappy about this and thought that this was another place not suitable for dates. They went inside, and she said that this was the lobby, and on the second floor there was an inn. There was a training area in the basement. Would he like to take a look at it? He agreed and thought that he had been here before. They went down there, and Shifa attracted the attention of the adventurers who were inside. He followed her and thought, I see. She is quite famous. He still can't believe that he is now on a date with a celebrity. He was very surprised when the guy said loudly that he should concentrate. If he continued shaking like this, he would be eaten by a monster. Many people were training with weapons and they were watching from the side. He stood there with a worried look and wondered, Is this really a date? If you think about it, it didn't feel like a date from the very beginning. He's probably the only one who thinks it's a date. After all, she just asked him out for a walk. Even what she meant by that still remains a mystery. She turned to him and asked if he was having fun. He was confused by this question and agreed. His attention was drawn to several guys who said that this was his chance. He should be bolder. They were with him. He was surprised by what he heard and wondered, did he want to confess to her? The guy approached her, bowed, extended his hand, and loudly asked if she would be his training partner. The protagonist was surprised by this and thought that it turns out he was just talking about training. She was about to say something, but he understood everything and said that everything was fine. He would like to see her and fight. She said that then she didn't mind. She took a spear and stood in front of the guy with a sword, and he watched from the side and thought that he would see her fight for the first time. He ran to attack and said that he would do it. He quickly ran up to her and started hitting her with his sword, and she easily blocked it. She dodged another blow and with a sharp movement of her spear knocked the sword out of his hands. Immediately after that, he fell to the ground and she put the spear to his throat, which is why he admitted defeat. MC looked at her in surprise and thought that it was amazing. Her movements were so smooth. She was so cool. He was very glad that he got to see her in adventurer mode. Shifa helped him to his feet, and a girl approached her and asked if she would mind training with her too. She apologized and said that that was all for now. She started to leave and said that she had important things to do today. She approached him, and he asked if she was finished. They went outside. She called him by name and asked if he was hungry. He wondered if they should go to some stylish cafe. They came to a restaurant and he thought that she should spare him since they were here yesterday. They went inside, where Annie met them, and with a surprised expression asked what they were doing here. He was surprised when he saw her and thought that she seemed to have said that she would help in the restaurant. Shifa raised her hand and said that they came to eat. She was surprised by what she heard, grabbed his hand and said loudly that she generally understood, but that was not the point. He should walk with her. They walked away from her and she asked if he was here alone with her. He agreed and she asked if they were on a date. He asked why it mattered to her. She was embarrassed by this and said in a confused voice that she did not see any other reason. Gio, looking a little confused, said that she chose the places they went to, but it didn't feel like a date at all. She said that they ended up at their restaurant. He said that he had fun nonetheless, although he didn't know what she was thinking. She turned and looked at Shifa, who was sitting at the table with a smile and looking out the window with a smile. She sighed and said with a smile that he still had a long way to go. 100 years was too early to go on a date with her. He was very surprised by this and asked loudly, did she say 100 years? She said that he should sit down at the table already. She would be here in a minute to take their order. He started to leave, looking upset, and thought that perhaps he had been rather presumptuous. She was not only older than him, but also an excellent adventurer. She was far out of his league. He came to the table and she asked what they talked about. He said that nothing special. He opened the menu and thought that if it were a date, it seemed like she would take him to more special places. She called his name and asked, he seems drained. Is it because he's tired? He was confused by her question and said that it was a little like that. She looked at him with a calm expression on her face and said that he shouldn't worry. He would try good food and he would feel better right away. He was surprised by these words and thought that she was surprisingly simple. He smiled and said that she was right. They should eat. He thought that it didn't really matter. Even if it wasn't a date, he was still spending time with her. They went outside and she said with a smile that Lucas was the best restaurant of all that she knew, maybe even the best in the world. He looked at her with a surprised expression on his face and thought that this was a special place. They were both about to say something at the same time, which is why they got confused and started apologizing. He asked her to go first, and she asked if he was unhappy because of her. She apologized. She tried her best to think of the choice of places, but it seemed she didn't do a very good job. She wanted him to have fun, since this day was supposed to be her gratitude for everything, but she doesn't know at all how to make someone have fun, so she just decided to take him to her favorite places. She thought that by doing so, he would like it too. The protagonist, with a surprised expression, thought that this was why such a choice was made. All these places were special to her. Shifa said that, to be honest, she wanted to go to the dungeon, but thought it was too dangerous. She was surprised by this and said loudly that she did the right thing. He laughed with a joyful look and said that that's how she thought about it. She called his name and asked if he had a good time. He agreed with this and said that as long as he was with her, he would have fun wherever they went. He started to feel embarrassed and thought it sounded like a confession. She smiled happily and said that it was good. He looked at her with a smile and thought that she was both weird and cool. He saw a side of her that he had never seen before, and yet today was a wonderful day. Although, does the fact that she seemed to ignore what he said mean that she has no romantic interest in him? She said that there was one last place where she wanted to take him. They arrived and she said that it was her house. He was very surprised by this, blushed and wondered if she wanted to introduce him to her parents, although they already knew each other. She said that it was one of her favorite places. He followed her and thought that, however, if they could spend time together, then, suddenly, they heard someone loudly call the boss and say that he had bad news. She guessed that this voice came from the workshop and they went there together. He thought that for sure. Her family owned a blacksmith shop. They came closer. Shifa called her dad and asked, "What's going on here?" Billy turned to her and greeted her. He noticed MC and asked who he was. He said his name. He immediately remembered it, happily patted him on the shoulder, and said that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. He was about to ask something, but suddenly realized everything. With a displeased look, he began to clench his fists and loudly asked, did he really have a date with his precious daughter? She stood between them and said that he should leave this matter. What happened here? He remembered it and said that right now they are in a very difficult situation. The worker agreed with the boss and said that at this rate, everything was lost. A guy came to them and said with a smile that they were all very noisy. How are things going with the money? He looked at him and asked why he came. Kazuya said with a smile that he just came to check on him and at the same time to remind him that he owed him money for 3 months. Gio looked at him with a little surprise and wondered, does he owe money to this boor? Billy, with a displeased expression, loudly said that he would return the money. That's why they took on the huge order. Shifa looked at the worker and asked what happened. The worker said that the merchant who placed the order suddenly disappeared. Kazuya sighed and asked with a smile, can't he really put all the pieces together? He is already starting to seriously worry. He doesn't want to think about the bad, but he wonders if this merchant of his could suddenly abandon him. He was surprised by what he heard and asked loudly, does he mean to say that he is involved in this? He laughed and asked why he decided so. He has already given him enough deferments. After all, he is a legitimate moneylender. The protagonist, with a worried look, thought that no matter how you look at it, it looks dubious. What is his goal? Billy, with a displeased look, said that he asks to wait a little longer. He will definitely give everything. Kazuya refused with a smile and said that he is tired of waiting. He gave this forge as collateral. If he does not pay, then he will take everything here, and that will be just enough. He said loudly that this forge is important to him. It was passed down since the time of his grandfather, and he will not allow it to be destroyed. He said that then, they have a problem. Then, in exchange for this, how about giving away his daughter? They were both very surprised by what they heard, and MC stood in front of her and loudly said that he does not even need to think about such nonsense. He looked at him with a serious expression and asked what he said. Kazuya walked towards him, which made him worried and thought that he said it without thinking. Billy raised his hand to stop him and said that there was still some time before the appointed time, so he should go back to his place. He laughed and said that he had caught him. He had 3 days. He should try to prepare the money by then. The worker called the boss and said that he had contacted the Merchants Guild again and again, but they did not know a merchant by that name. He sat down on a chair and asked if he himself was behind this order all this time. He called Gio and said that he apologized for dragging him into this matter. He said that everything was fine. What was the current state of affairs? He said that he could not say that business was going well here, but they had skilled craftsmen and many regular customers. However, problems arose with some new customers, which caused them to go into the red. One evening, he was completely perplexed in the tavern. Then a man approached him, introducing himself as a loan shark named Kazuya. He asked, that's how they met, right? He agreed and said that at first he thought he was a nice guy. Things improved after they received an order from this fake merchant. However, he stopped contacting him, so he was forced to extend the loan repayment period. The workers looked at him and said that he was too gullible. Doesn't he think that it was because of him that they ended up in this situation? Billy was surprised by what he heard and asked loudly, did he even have a hand in this? They had no proof that he did it, and it would be difficult to repay the debt. The protagonist looked at the weapon and thought something didn't add up. Instead of trying to extort money from him, he tries to prevent him from paying his debt. Does he really need this old workshop for some reason? He remembered what he said before leaving, and Shifa said that if only she could use the reward for the boss, but 3 days were not enough for that. He asked how much money he owed him. It seemed that he could help if the amount was not too much. He thought with a smile that he could help out with a couple dozen gold coins received from the recent sale of the crops. In response, he showed 5 fingers, which made him wonder, is the debt only 50 coins? However, to everyone's surprise, he said that the debt was 500 gold coins. After that, they both left the workshop, and she said that she apologized for asking for his help. He said that it was okay, he would do his best to help. She looked at him with a small smile and thanked him for it. He left and thought that he didn't know why, but his target might be Shifa. Is there really nothing he can do? Even if he sells his crops, it is unlikely that he will make it in time. What if he can use it? At times like these, he likes to discuss it with Lily, but he has no idea where she is. However, she'll come for his harvest tomorrow morning. He can't afford to wait. He needs to try to find out about her at the Merchants Guild. He approached the girl, and she apologized and said that she was an elusive merchant, so even they didn't know where she was. He was surprised by this and asked, at least roughly, where she could be. He had urgent business. She said that even so, she had no idea where she could be. At that very moment, she came to this place, called him, and said that it was an unusual place to meet him. He turned around joyfully, called her by name, and said that he was very lucky, he was just looking for her. She asked what had him so worried. After that, they sat down on a bench, where he told her what had happened, and she said that it sounded like a pretty serious matter. He started looking for something in his pocket and said that he also wanted to show her something. He took out some ore, and she asked loudly with a surprised expression, "Is this gold ore?" He said that he grew it in his garden. If he could sell a bunch of such ore, would it be enough money to pay off the debt? She looked at the ore in her hand with a confused look and said that it would not be that easy. The country and the lords control the mines where the gold is mined. If he sold a large quantity, he would be suspected of illegal mining. He grabbed his head with a worried look and asked what he could do. She thought about it and said that he should let her think. Does he have any other ores? He agreed and said that he had quite a lot of different ores. She asked, then, if he had the so-called mithril ore. They came to his garden, where Lily saw a large crystal of mithril ore. She looked at it with a happy expression and said that it is mined in places with a high mana content. It can be mined in dungeons. MC said that this means that in places inaccessible to rulers. So, he can sell it? She refused and said that it is a rather rare metal, so selling it will also arouse suspicion. He was surprised by this and asked loudly, then what to do with it. She raised her hand and said that she had an idea. How about entrusting this matter to her? He said with a worried look that, however, the debt repayment period is only 3 days. She, with a calm expression, said that for that he should not worry and just leave this matter to her. He agreed and said that he was counting on her. After some time, Billy looked at the bag of money and said that this was all they could collect, but it was far from the full amount. It looks like he will have to part with the workshop. Shifa, looking worried, stood nearby and said that there was no need to do this. Gio came to them and greeted them. Lily introduced herself with a cheerful look and said that she came to place an order based on what he said. He stood up and said that to be honest, they were closing today. She said that the customer kindly offered to pay before the work was done. He was very surprised by this and asked loudly, "Is this true?" She took out a bag and said that although she does not know if this will be enough to pay his debt, she suggests that they just talk first. He should take a look at it. She took out mithril ore, which made him very surprised and asked loudly, "Did she even bring that much of this ore?" She said with a smile that she had more in her magic bag. She will give him this mithril, and in exchange, she wants to order 200 sets of shields and swords. She gave him the document and asked, "How about that amount for everything?" He looked at it with a surprised expression, and Shifa asked, "An order for 200 sets? So they will have enough money to pay the debt." He asked her to wait, and said that it sounded too good to be true. Is she trying to deceive him? The protagonist was surprised by this and thought that he had become much more cautious. Lily said that they might not trust her since this was their first deal. However, he entrusted her with this deal. They trust him, right? She called her dad and said that everything was fine. She trusts him. He looked at her, remembered what happened earlier, agreed, and said that he was the one who stood up for her. They shook hands, and he said that they had an agreement. He would do his best. She said, with a happy expression, that she was counting on him, after which she handed over the bag of money and said that here is his payment. He opened the bag and said that there are platinum coins. Shifa looked at it in surprise and said that she heard that they are worth more than regular coins and that only nobles and large merchants use them. MC also saw such coins for the first time and thought that if he thinks about it, she never told him who got this job from. Billy ran and loudly said that they need to strike while the iron is hot. He will go and talk to Kazuya right now. She, looking worried, loudly called out to her dad and asked him to stop. He, along with a crowd of guys, was standing outside and asked with a smile, what was the rush? He wasn't planning to escape from the city in the middle of the night, was he? Today is payment day. It would be very problematic if he suddenly ran away. Billy turned around, called his daughter and said that she should stay here. Perhaps they had their eye on her. Gio turned around and said that it would be best that way. She should stay in the workshop. Kazuya asked with a smile. He hadn't managed to collect the required amount by that day. Had he? He was about to say something else, but he interrupted him and said that his debt was 500 gold coins. That should be enough. He was very surprised when he saw the platinum coins in his hand and said in a confused voice that it was impossible. How did he manage to get so much money in 3 days? Lily waved her hand and said that they had just made a deal, although she was just an intermediary. He looked at her with a displeased expression and wondered who she even was. He didn't expect to meet someone who could collect such a sum in just 3 days. She was about to say something else, but he looked up and said with a smile that he had completely forgotten about the interest. They were surprised by this, and he said that it was quite obvious to add this. How many times had he pitied him and delayed his payment? Taking into account interest, 1,500 gold coins. They were surprised by what they heard and asked loudly, triple the original amount. Billy was indignant about this and loudly said that this was complete nonsense. Where did he get such figures? Kazuya said that he was at fault, but this was the real amount of the debt. However, he does not think that these coins and this seedy workshop are enough to cover his entire debt. He has no choice but to give him his daughter. The protagonist was outraged by this and thought that he knew it. His goal was Shifa. Billy became very angry about this and said that he would only get his daughter over his dead body. He looked at him with a smile and said that he should not be so angry. They did not want to resort to violence. He was about to say something loudly, but he went forward and said that they should stop this. He walked up to them and said loudly that he would never allow him to do this. They were very angry about this. One of them was about to say something, but Kazuya stopped him. He said that it was him again, the weakling protector. Why was he getting involved in this? Did he have anything to do with it? Was he completely tired of living? He clenched his hand into a fist and said in a frightened voice that this had absolutely nothing to do with him. It was because Shifa was his precious friend. He chuckled because of this and said loudly that he admitted that he had a temper. He grabbed him by the clothes, swung his fist and asked loudly if he thought he was ready to consolidate his dignity and endure all the pain of reality. He was about to say something else, but Lily walked up to them and apologized to get his attention. He turned to her. She started looking for something in her bag and said that she still couldn't finish talking. The client is the ruler of these lands. She showed the contract, and everyone nearby was shocked by what they heard. The ruler was sitting in her office at the time and said that she couldn't do anything. She had to help her out. MC was also shocked and wondered, did she mean the head of the provincial city of Arcel? Kazuya let him go, looked at the document, and said that judging by this seal, there can be no doubt. She said that if they try to take an unfair fee from this workshop, it will definitely reach the ears of the ruler. It seems that this will be very inconvenient for them. He became very angry about this, took the bag of money and said that he accepts a fee of 500 gold coins. After that, he left with the rest of the guys. Gio fell to his knees from the tension and thought that it was terrible. Billy approached him and asked with a worried look if he was injured. He was incredibly surprised. Shifa called his name and went to him. He turned to her, apologized for what happened, and said that, however, he was glad that everything turned out well. She silently approached him and hugged him, which surprised him very much, while the others stood nearby and laughed. She thanked him with a smile and said that Dad's workshop was saved thanks to him. He was very embarrassed about what happened and said that he could not have done it without Lily. Billy turned to her, agreed and said that she received an order from the ruler himself. She really is an amazing merchant. She said with a smile that there was nothing wrong with that. She was glad to help, considering how much he tries for others. By the way, he was very cool. Billy patted him on the back and said that he proved himself to be a true knight. The protagonist became even more embarrassed because of this and said that it just happened that way. He remembered what happened and thought that he had said something so outrageous in front of her. He called her with a very embarrassed expression on his face and said, "What about what he said earlier?" She said that, to be honest, she didn't hear anything because she was far away. He said with a kind smile that, without exaggeration, he saved them today. Shifa said that she would have to express her gratitude again sometime. He smiled and said that it was not necessary. He remembered what happened earlier and thought that that hug was more than enough. However, now he feels relieved. Normally, he wouldn't be able to stand up to such a scary guy. He's glad that he could protect her smile. At the same time, Kazuya came to the old building, kicked the floor and loudly asked how dare this weakling get in his way. He thought, with a very displeased expression on his face, that he had spent a lot of time preparing, but now the plan was over. He couldn't report this to the boss. The guy called him and said that he couldn't find her base no matter how hard he tried, but he found the most haunted place. It's a house where a brother and sister who have recently reached adulthood live, and that's where that guy lives. He said that's more than enough. His hands are itching for that freak now. They will take him prisoner and use him as bait. At the same time, Marin said that she managed to make a new potion. Dennis looked at it with a joyful look and said that it was a beautiful sky blue color. What effect does this potion have? She called his name and asked, how about trying it? He asked, this is the role of an assistant, right? She can provide it to him. He drank it right away. She brought a bucket of water and said that now he should dip his face in the water. He agreed, did it, and with a surprised expression on his face wondered, can he breathe? He raised his head and said with a surprised expression that it was amazing. He could breathe underwater. She said that it was a water potion made from air flowers. Even being underwater, you would feel the same as on land. Denise asked, was it Gio who brought them these flowers? Marin agreed, and he said that air flowers bloom only at an altitude of several thousand meters above sea level, which is why they are a rare ingredient. However, he still wondered where he got such ingredients. She was about to leave, but he noticed this, called her by name, and asked what she was planning to do with this water, and the bottle from which she had just drunk. She should pour it all out right now. And even better, he would do it himself. She loudly refused, and said that she would need the water tonight, and the bottle would become a precious family heirloom. He became indignant about this and loudly asked what she was even talking about. Shifa entered the store, apologized for intruding, and called them by name. She was distracted by this, and Denise grabbed a bucket and poured it out. After that, he came out and said, welcome, with a cheerful look. She looked at them and asked, is something wrong? He said with a smile that it was nothing special. Did she come for something specific? She agreed and said that she was getting ready for the next trip. Marin began wiping away tears, and he said that then she had come just in time. They had just finished a new potion. After some time, the protagonist called Milky and said it was time for lunch. He ran to him and said that it was his favorite, fried mackerel. Senna called him and asked, "He's grown up pretty well, right?" He agreed, and said that it was because lately he had started drinking more than just milk. She said that he had grown bigger than she had imagined, although the cat had become so big that he could no longer be carried in her arms. He thought with a confused smile that it was still a monster's egg. However, he didn't think that he was dangerous, since he was so attached to him. He began to pet him, and said that although he had grown, he was still just as spoiled. She looked at this with a joyful look and said that she wanted to pet him too. Milky immediately began to growl angrily, looking at her, and he said that apparently he didn't love her. She was unhappy about this and asked, however, why? He asked, wasn't she going to the dungeon today? She better eat quickly, because she still needed to get ready. She remembered this, was getting ready to eat, and he asked, what area were they going to explore now? After some time, she came to the dungeon and asked if there really was an underwater dungeon. Shifa agreed and said that, however, as she could understand, they were at a disadvantage since they would have to hold their breath to explore it. She took out a potion and said that, however, they now had a water potion. Because of this, no one had ever managed to conquer it. Annie said that the ice potion was very effective. They would see how it went with this. They drank the potion and then went underwater. She was surprised by this, and said that she could actually breathe. Shifa was also surprised and said that she could walk easily despite being underwater. Annie, with a surprised expression, said that they could also hear each other. Besides, the monster was approaching. She thought that her hunting sense was still working. Senna noticed the monster approaching them, and said that it was a rather large fish. She drew her sword and, with a calm expression on her face, killed the shark with one blow. Shifa watched this and said that her skill with a sword had not diminished at all. She stood next to them and said that they would definitely be able to conquer this place. Marin's potions never disappoint. She said with a thoughtful look that Jin helped them with the ingredients. She said with a confused smile that she thought so. Of course, there is no information about this dungeon, so they must make a map of this place. They continued moving further through the dungeon, killing monsters along the way and drawing a map. They reached a cave with many corals and fish, and were very surprised by the beauty of this place. They went down there, and Shifa, with a surprised expression on her face, asked, "Is that coral?" Annie looked around and said that if it weren't a dungeon, this place would become a very profitable tourist spot. They must be careful, because monsters might be hiding here. Senna walked further, looked at the fish and said that there are some fish here that even her brother doesn't raise. I wonder if they're tasty? She looked at her from the side and said that raising monsters is a bad idea. Shifa said that, however, they're not that dangerous. She said that the problem with breathing underwater makes this place a difficult dungeon. But with water potions, conquering it will be surprisingly quite easy. Senna looked at something, pointed and said that they should look at it. They saw a huge monster nearby and asked, "Is it the boss of the underwater area?" At the same time, the protagonist was sleeping peacefully at home. A crowd of guys came to his house and said that his adventurer sister was absent today. So the moment is perfect. They just need to grab one weakling, so they should quickly go get him. They broke down the door, which immediately woke up Milky. He started growling, pulled him by the sleeve. He also woke up and asked, "What's wrong?" He noticed that the door started to open and he thought that it was definitely not Senna. Who are they? Two guys entered the house. Milky quickly ran up to them and bit one of them hard on the leg. He screamed loudly in pain and asked loudly what a cat was doing here. One of them took out a knife and was about to hit him, but MC noticed this and loudly warned him of the danger. He dodged this attack and dealt a strong blow with his claws to another guy. They got scared because of this and loudly said that this was clearly not an ordinary cat. They have to run away from here. He looked at the door with a worried look, sitting on the bed, and asked what was that. He called Milky and asked how he felt. Was he hurt? He meowed in response and he asked if the danger was over yet. He needed to run to the garden. He ran out of the house. They found him and loudly said that everyone here, he was in the yard. They have to find him. He looked at them with a worried look and wondered, are these guys looking for him with weapons? If they caught him, then nothing good could happen. Milky meowed loudly and said that he shouldn't worry because he had strong friends. At that moment, golems appeared and began attacking the attacking guys, and he asked loudly in surprise what the golems were doing in such a place. They should calm down because there were only a few of them here. The golems continued to appear, which worried them even more, and they loudly asked how many of them were there. How could he know? Kazuya walked towards them and loudly asked how much longer they would try to catch one weakling. One of them turned to him and said, "What's the matter?" Golems started crawling out of nowhere. Geo peered out from behind a tree and wondered if someone else had appeared here. He drew his sword from its sheath and with one sharp blow destroyed the golem that approached him. He looked at the other guys with a serious expression and asked, "Are they having trouble with these pieces of clay? Is this some kind of joke they have?" He looked at him with a surprised expression and wondered, Did he come to take revenge for what happened? He dealt with the golem in the blink of an eye. The guy said loudly that, however, no matter how much they try, they climb again. Kazuya destroyed another golem with a sword strike and loudly said that they should get out of the way. He noticed the protagonist, who was hiding behind a tree, and loudly asked, was this his doing? No matter how many times he created these monsters, it was useless. He started to run away with Milky, and he followed them and asked, does he think he can escape from him? How dare he waste his time? He was very surprised when he noticed a huge golem looking at him from behind a large tree. He ran up to this monster, struck it with his sword, but was very surprised when it broke after that. He was very scared because of this, turned around, laughed nervously, and said that this was some kind of nonsense. He dropped his broken sword, fell to the ground and asked, where did all these monsters come from? Earlier, when MC was watching this from the side, he thought that this guy was very strong. He destroys golems with one blow. Milky meowed, which made him turn around, agreed and thought that they should move away. They started to run away, and he thought, however, what should he do? The golems can't even slow him down. There must be at least something. At that moment, a system window appeared in front of him, asking if he wanted to use the Mega Guardian. He continued to run and thought that he hadn't tried this skill yet. The choice was not great anyway, so he should try. A huge golem began to appear, and he loudly asked if he could make more. The system confirmed it, and he created 3 more Mega Guardians. Kazuya was very surprised when he saw these huge golems. Gio was also surprised by this and thought that he didn't know that he could create such huge golems. It's good that it's the middle of the night. He broke his sword, couldn't believe what he saw, and with a serious expression on his face, he mentally ordered them to throw him out of here. The golem grabbed him, which is why he was very scared and loudly asked to let him go. The golem threw him to the ground, and he hit his back very hard, which is why he lost consciousness. The guys picked him up and loudly said that this was complete madness, not a garden. They should run away from here. They won't get anything good here. He stood there with a worried look and asked, is there no more threat? The huge golem, who was standing next to him, nodded in agreement. Milky rubbed against his leg and began to meow with a contented look. He stroked its head, thanked them, and said that he doesn't know what he would do without them. At the same time, in the underwater area, they reached the surface, and Annie, looking a little displeased, said she simply couldn't believe it. The boss turned out to be such a colossal monster. Senna, with a surprised expression on her face, said it was about 100 meters long. She, looking a little confused, said that she shouldn't have taken unfamiliar territories so lightly. Shifa asked if she thought they could defeat this monster. Senna raised her hand, agreed, and said she thought it would be very tasty. They looked at her and said that wasn't what she should be thinking about right now. However, she agreed with her. Annie sighed and said that so far everything was going pretty well. They still need to make a map before returning. They won't fight the boss for now. They agreed and said that it was so big that they would immediately know when it was approaching. Besides, they had Annie's gift. They were going to drink the potion, and she thought that if you think about it, for such a big monster, its presence was somehow too strange. Maybe she imagined it? After that, they went underwater, and she said that it seemed like they had explored enough. Now they could return to the surface. Senna sighed with a satisfied look and said that they would finally return home. They started to leave, and she said that they should not let their guard down on the way back. They would need a strategy against the boss the next time they came here. Suddenly, they saw a huge fish swimming near them. Annie was very surprised when she saw it and wondered how it suddenly appeared right in front of them. She didn't sense it with her hunter's senses. Senna, looking worried, said that they should run. They started to run, but a huge monster started chasing them. It opened its mouth and began to suck in water, and Annie turned around and thought that this was bad, that it would swallow them. Suddenly, Shifa stopped and turned to face the monster. She looked at this monster and said that it didn't seem too scary. The volcano wasn't like that. She started to use her ability, and Annie looked at it and thought that this was the Empress's power. It is a gift that weakens enemies, but the stronger the enemy, the less effective it is. Therefore, against such a gigantic opponent, Senna noticed something, pointed her finger and said loudly that she should look there. Annie looked at this monster and asked in a surprised voice, is its body falling apart? Shifa, with a serious expression on her face, looked at it and said that she was right. It wasn't one massive fish, but a school of small fish. She looked at it in surprise and said that I see, that's why his presence was so weak that she didn't feel it. They took out their weapons and said, that's what it meant. It was all just a false show. They shouldn't be careless. There was probably a leader among them, a larger fish. She would deal with them all at once. She would provide support. She began to use her ability and said that these small fish should bow. Senna began to deliver rapid strikes with her sword and killed these small fish. Annie, with a satisfied expression on her face, said that it seemed that her ability put them at a disadvantage. Their movements became rather sluggish. This way they would gradually reduce their numbers. Among the pile of small ones, there was one larger fish, which was staring at them intently. Many of these fish swam towards them and hit them, which is why they stopped attacking. Shifa tried to cover her head with her hands and thought that this huge school of fish was rushing towards them. She couldn't continue using her gift like this. After that, the fish started to turn around, and Senna said loudly that they were coming back. She raised her hand and ordered them to bow down. She couldn't use her ability, and a bunch of fish started crashing into them again. They felt a lot of pain and said loudly that this was bad, that if they continued to attack them like this, they would be in serious danger. Senna noticed a fish that was different from the others, attacked it with her sword and asked loudly, "So it was all because of him, right?" Immediately after that, many fish that were attacking them started to swim in different directions. Annie sighed with relief and said that everyone suddenly scattered. Shifa looked around and asked, "Is it all over?" She raised her hand and said that when she killed that fish, they all swam in different directions. They came up to her, looked at it, and said that, without a doubt, that fish was the main one, controlling all the others. How did she even manage to notice it in that swarm and kill it? She said with a happy look that she just caught a glimpse and instinctively cut it in half. They admired her and said that she used her unrivaled skill again. She asked if they thought this monster was the boss of this zone. Shifa agreed and said that looks were deceiving. However, this monster was still strong. Annie began to massage her shoulder and said that her whole body hurt. They should go back and report this to the guild. Canaria met them and happily said that they were just in time. She came up and asked if something happened. She said that she had great news. The other day, they were able to conquer the volcanic region, right? Thanks to their achievements, someone is very interested in meeting them. Shifa raised her hand, called her name, and said that they finished conquering the water region as well. She reacted calmly to this, but when she realized it, she loudly asked what she just said. She took the jar of dead fish and said with a shocked expression that she was simply speechless. How did they manage to achieve something so unprecedented in such a short period of time? Now, they will definitely receive an especially warm welcome. The person wishing to meet them is Lord Arcel. They were all very surprised by what they heard and loudly asked, "Is this true?" She agreed and said that they were told that they were invited to the castle. They said that he was quite an important person. Have they never met rulers before? For commoners like them, they are so unattainable that it can be compared to flying to the clouds. Canaria said with a smile that thanks to their conquest of the volcanic region, it has become popular with other adventurers. It seems that the economy of this region is experiencing economic growth due to the influx of valuable raw materials. This is the first time the ruler wishes to meet such young adventurers. It seems it is because of their high contribution. Shifa thought about it and said that although it was all thanks to the apothecary who created the ice potion, she said with a smile that was why she was also invited. They remembered that she was withdrawn and socially phobic and wondered how she was doing after such news. Senna asked what about her brother. She was about to say something, but Annie immediately shut her up and said that his garden was a secret. Canaria said that she understood that it was quite unexpected, but they should come to the castle for dinner in 5 days. Shifa agreed and said that it would not be a problem since they would take a break after conquering the underwater region. She looked at them with a smile and said that she needed to report on this. Senna was happy about this and said that they would finally get some rest. They left the building and she said that they would see each other in 5 days. She began to leave with a happy look and said that she had tried hard as an adventurer, so it will be possible to relax and let her brother pamper her. At the same time, Milky walked around the room with a serious look and looked around. The protagonist looked at him and thought that nothing had happened since that incident, but since then he has not relaxed. He does not know whether they have given up their attempts or not. There is a possibility that they can come back and attack again. He walked around the room with a worried look and said that Senna is also late. Did they really grab her? What should they do? They were very worried when they heard the creak of the door opening. Milky immediately ran towards the sound. He ran after it and wondered, is it them again? She blocked Milky's bite and asked with a little surprise, what is he doing all of a sudden? She called her brother and said that she was back. He was glad when he saw her, ran and said that he was glad that she was okay. Today she came later than usual. She said that something suddenly happened to her, but now she is resting for a few days. He began to pull Milky and said that everything is fine, she is his sister and she is not an enemy. He immediately calmed down and she asked with a puzzled expression, what happened? They came to the table. She was about to start eating and he told her about what happened earlier. She was very surprised by what she heard and asked loudly, was he attacked in the middle of the night? He was fine, right? He's not injured? He refused and said that Milky and the golems protected him. However, after that, they could not sleep well, because they did not know when to expect the next attack. Senna looked at them and said that she realized that there must be a serious problem. Who were the attackers? MC said that among them, the leader was clearly visible. A rough bald guy with sharp features and tattoos. He's a skilled swordsman and ordinary golems were easy targets for him. She should also be very careful. At night, she should definitely barricade the door to her room. Besides, they might attack her outside the house. Senna, with a calm expression, said that he shouldn't worry. Unlike him, she could stand up for herself. He was indignant about this and said that although she was an adventurer, she was still inexperienced. She was still calm and said that everything was fine. There was no need to worry. He thought with a worried look that she was still as casual as before. She remembered what happened earlier and said that she would soon go to a meeting with the city ruler. He became even more worried about this and loudly asked what she had already done. She was indignant at his words and said that he misunderstood everything. She was invited. The next day, he went outside and said that they should use the magic stones that Senna brought and strengthen the garden again. He looked at the house and wondered, I wonder if she was still sleeping? Since she was now trying hard as an adventurer, he had to do everything in his power to keep her from overdoing it. He looked away and said that mega golems were certainly powerful, but they couldn't be used during the day. Was there any other way? If only he had something to drive away those freaks. The system notified that the magic stones had been absorbed. He learned a new skill. Now he could grow new crops. He thought that something like an invisible wall wouldn't hurt him. He remembered something and said that he had previously learned a skill that he never tried. He looked at the skill for moving between gardens and joyfully asked loudly, will he be able to escape like that using teleportation? A system window appeared in front of him, asking if he wanted to move between gardens. He agreed, but the system notified that he couldn't do it at the moment. He thoughtfully found it strange and asked, at the moment? That means nothing now, but when will it work? Then he wants to look at another skill. He looked at the garden movement skill and saw a system window that said whether he wanted to switch to movement mode. He agreed, but suddenly everything started shaking and Milky was very scared because of it. He looked to the side and wondered if the neighbor's house had shrunk a little. He ran to the exit and thought that this couldn't be. He left the house and saw that his house had moved a small distance. He was very worried about this and loudly asked to change it back. He looked at his house in shock and thought that this was an amazing ability. He can't use garden movement to escape from them. It will stand out even more than the mega golems. He returned to the garden and said that these skills are too problematic. What about crops? Maybe he can grow something incredible. He saw a list of flowers, which upset him greatly, and he fell to his knees with a dissatisfied look. He sighed with dissatisfaction and said that none of this would be of any use to him. Milky came up to him and licked his cheek. He looked at them and thought that they were trying to cheer him up. He smiled, started to get up and thanked them for that. Geo stood up and said with a serious look that if anything happened again, they should do their best to cope with it. He was counting on them. His determination disappeared, and he said that although he was still a little scared, he clenched his hand into a fist and said that, however, Senna was here now. He couldn't afford to be afraid. He had to protect her. She was standing nearby and heard this, after which she left, and he said that it was time for her to wake up. He came to her room, pulled the door handle, and thought that he seemed to be telling her to barricade the door. He entered her room and noticed that she was not there. At the same time, Kazuya walked down an alley with a dissatisfied expression and thought that this weakling would pay for everything. He remembered how people asked with a smirk, how did they escape with such an advantage? He couldn't handle some child. He thought with a dissatisfied expression that they always knew how to talk. But in reality, they themselves hadn't seen these golems and wouldn't do anything to them. Not only was he deprived of his position, but even his subordinates turned against him. Now that he was kicked out of the organization, his life was in danger. He came to his house, peeked around the corner, and thought that this was all because of this weakling. However, he can't just up and walk into this strange house. Maybe he should just wait until he comes outside? He noticed Senna, looked at her with a smile, and thought that he seemed to have heard that he lived with his adventurer sister. A girl who had just matured, that's perfect. He followed her and thought that he would use her to lure this guy out. They came to an empty alley, and he thought that there couldn't be a better place. He approached her and with a smirk told her that she better not make any noise if she didn't want to die. She remembered the description that the protagonist told her, turned to him, and with a frightening smile asked, was it he who attacked her brother? Kazuya became very worried when he saw her calm expression and wondered what was wrong with her. He asked, had she heard about him from her brother? Then that simplifies everything. From now on, she will do everything he says. She calmly refused. He, with a serious expression, took out his sword and asked, did she still not realize what situation she got into? She smiled and said that it seemed that he should realize what situation he got into. She delivered an incredibly fast blow with her sword, causing him to drop his sword. He was very surprised by what happened, looked down and saw a deep wound on his hand. He tried to stop the profuse bleeding and wondered what just happened. He didn't even see anything. She swung her sword to brush the blood off the blade and said that he put her brother in danger. Putting her brother in such fear is unforgivable. While they are around, they can't sleep peacefully. He was very scared, fell to the ground and begged her to stop. Senna came closer, pointed the sword at him, and said that therefore they should never approach her brother again. He looked at her with a very scared look and thought that approaching them was a huge mistake. After that, she returned home. MC called her loudly and she asked what happened to him. He said loudly that he wanted to ask, where was she? She calmly said that she was just taking a short walk. He said in a worried voice that he told her yesterday that it was dangerous to go out alone. What if she had been attacked? He was very surprised when she calmly said that. By the way, she met that bald guy. He could calm down because he promised not to bother him anymore. He asked with a very worried look, seriously, she wasn't in danger? She denied it with a smile, and he said that then he was glad. He wondered if he had just given up, or was she really absurdly strong? She asked with a smile. Now he can relax, right? Now she has a lot of sleep ahead of her. He came up to her, patted her head, thanked her for it, and said that, however, she better not put so much pressure on herself. She looked at him with a smile and said that he shouldn't worry. No matter what happened, she would always protect him. He was a little confused by this, smiled, and said that he didn't even know how to feel about the fact that his younger sister was protecting him. She said that everything was fine because he was so kind and weak.